Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the September 24th meeting of the DDAC. I'm Nick Cappoletti. I'm the chair. I'm joined by John Maltby, who's in our New York City office as our vice chair. I want to welcome everybody. And thank you all for attending today or participating. We first like to do a roll call to make sure that we have quorum, which in just a quick count, I think we did, which is good because we have some business to conduct. So why don't we start in just asking the council members here to identify themselves. Tom? Oh, okay, well, we know Tom is here. Okay. We've Randy is here. We have Jeff Fox, Gary Goldstein, Teresa Hamlin, Paul Joslin, Bill Knights. Sumatra. Stephanie. Randy. Okay, and let's go to Syracuse. Dan, I know you're in Syracuse. Can you hear us? Dan Brown? So you just lost Syracuse. Okay. New York City, John, you're in New York. Is there anybody else with you?
You'll potentially hear that.
Myself, a parent and a consumer.
Very good, thanks. Missy Miller, Long Island.
Ned, this is Dan. I'm here.
Yes, we're here.
We're here.
We have Missy Miller, Lynn,
Jerry Bennett.
Jerry.
Jerry Athenas. Takis, Jerry Athenas.
Jerry and Missy in Long Island, correct?
Yes, there's 3 of us on Long Island, yeah.
Okay, good, thank you. All right, now attending via video.
You'll actually have that.
Janice? Janice, Janice? Jerry?
Stewart is attending by video.
Stewart?
Janice Chisholm, New York City. I think you called me. I couldn't unmute.
Yeah, and Janice, you're calling from remotely, correct? Or your video?
Yes, I'm videoing.
Thank you. Buffalo. We have Buffalo online.
Yes, it's Susan Hetherington, and I apologize, but they couldn't make the video work, but I am here.
Great, thank you for joining us, Susan. And did I miss anybody who's either joining on video or any members?
This is Shamika Andrews. I'm here via video.
Okay, Shamika, thank you.
Sounds like a dead blow.
We're joined by, we've got Gail. We're Fatal for Family Support Services and Kristen. Thank you for joining us. And it's Melissa. Melissa Stickle. Well, thank you very much. And again, we do have a quorum because we do have some business to attend to. So why don't we start? This is our agenda. Again, we're going to follow our normal pattern, if you will, or agenda model. We'll start with the OPWDD update. Unfortunately, today, Commissioner Bear is not able to join us, but we will have Aviva providing the OPWDD update. We allowed some time for a response to DDAC recommendations that have been made in the past. We'll allow some time for discussion. We are then going to vote on the bylaws, which were distributed last month to all members. So we'll take a vote and some discussion on the bylaws. Then we'll do committee reports. So we do have a couple of committees that will be making recommendations. We'll then follow up with discussion and then public comment. Okay, great. Start with Deepa.
Okay, thank you, Nick. Good morning, everyone. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Aviva Kindo. I'm the Deputy Commissioner for the Division of Service Access, Program Implementation, and Stakeholder Supports at OPWDD. Acting Commissioner Bear sends her regards, and I'm pleased to fill in for her to provide you with our latest updates on our initiatives. I wanted to first speak with folks about the final managed care report from Guidehouse, which was released at the end of August and is now posted on our website. I know that many of you have been asking about the report and when it might be available. So just to recap, the final report does not recommend a full transition of the OPWDD system of services and supports to managed care. The report specifically recommends that OPWDD waiver services should remain in the fee-for-service model, which is how we currently deliver and pay for services. Can folks hear me? Okay, perfect. The final report offers several clear suggestions and considerations that we believe warrants further evaluation, including improved integration of care for the physical and behavioral health needs through specialized managed care organizations supported through value-based payment structures, the continued evaluation and improvement of the CCO model of care coordination as a means to leverage more effective service coordination and person-centered outcomes, continuing to build upon the goals of the strategic plan to improve the quality of care and access to services, including increasing the availability and access to meaningful day and employment activities, making regulatory and policy changes to improve health equity and access and to reduce administrative complexity, and also increasing the capacity to serve people with complex needs. The report also highlights areas of the current system of supports and healthcare services that are working well for people with developmental disabilities based on the feedback that Guidehouse received. The first would be OPWDD's community-based services and supports, helping to meet the goals of the individuals and families supported, such as residential day, community hub, and family supports and services. Positive care management experiences for people in need of services who can be supported individually over a period of time. The ability for people to receive services based on their choice through person-centered planning. As for the areas that are not working well for people with developmental disability, the report specifically notes barriers to accessing care, including provider shortages and lack of specialty providers, complicated administrative processes and long delays. Access to quality care is more difficult for people with complex medical and behavioral needs, as well as those living in rural areas of the state. And a lack of consistency in receiving medical, behavioral, and dental care, or people simply being denied care. The report indicates that if we are to decide to further examine the managed care system of support, that the next step would include a feasibility study. And I just want to be clear and remind folks that we have made no decisions on the recommendations of the Guidehouse final report, and no final decisions will be made at this time. I'm also excited to talk with folks about the fact that OPWDD is creating a new advocacy service office, which will report directly to the acting commissioner. The office is being created in acknowledgement of the importance of the voices and experiences of those who receive services from OPWDD and their families, and will be led by a new advocacy services director. Recruitment for this position is currently underway. This new office will lead the peer specialist program, as well as oversee the ombudsman program and focus on other advocacy efforts. So just a little bit about the peer specialist program. Recruitment for the peer specialist program began in early 2024, and the program anticipates, and we anticipate, that we will have staff on board by next month. The peer specialist program will advocate alongside of people who receive services through our delivery system. It will also strengthen the capacity of self-advocates and the self-advocacy community to represent their own interests, and also educate people about their rights. The peer specialist program will also ensure that decision makers consider the perspectives of people with lived experience by participating in staff training, providing input on policies and procedures, and working with OPWDD leadership. For those of you who are not already aware, OPWDD has selected Community Service Society of New York as the new ombudsman to develop a program to help people with developmental disabilities advocate for themselves and help resolve concerns related to accessing services provided by OPWDD, the care coordination organizations, and other providers certified by OPWDD. As the new ombudsman, Community Service Society of New York will educate people about their rights, provide a process for timely and independent resolution of concerns related to the access to the delivery of services with OPWDD's not-for-profits and state-operated systems. It will also help to refer people to legal representation when needed and provide data-driven feedback to OPWDD about how to improve our system overall. We're working with the vendor now on the program development with a goal of launching the program by the end of 2024. The initial focus will be on vendor hiring and training to support the program implementation. As a reminder, we had issued regulations that for public comment. Comments are due September 29th for the two new proposed regulations, and that would be supported decision-making and pathways to employment. There were updates made to the supported decision-making that would include outlining the supported decision-making process, setting the criteria for both formal and informal supported decision-making agreements, prescribing the authority of a formal supported decision-making agreement and third-party obligation, and the obligation of the third party to honor it, defining the care coordination organization's role in the supported decision-making process, as well as updating notice requirements to existing OPWDD regulations. With regards to the Pathways to Employment program, the regulations define what pathways to employment services are. It expands the types of allowable services. It also reorders the language to match other employment and vocational services, making the regulation clearer. And it also requires community-based vocational experiences for individuals to assist in building a career path, and sets the requirements for billing, training, and documentation. With regards to workforce initiatives, which is another area that we remain focused on, addressing the workforce challenges, our work to elevate the direct support profession has resulted in over 2,000 direct support professionals to date receiving advanced credentialing and bonuses through the National Alliance for Direct Support Professionals eBadge Academy, with more direct support staff enrolling every day. Governor Hochul has awarded SUNY's Direct Support Micro-Credentialing Program an additional $32 million to expand programming with 21 SUNY campuses and is expected to support 6,000 students by 2030. And of course, our $9 million joint recruitment and marketing campaign with voluntary providers. Most of you should be familiar with the More Than Work initiative. It has driven over 24,000 job seekers to both state and voluntary providers' websites since the launch date in March. The campaign, which highlights the value of becoming a direct support professional, has been extended by an additional 2 years. So you should all continue to see the campaign featured in ads all across the state. I know driving up here this morning, I saw billboards, which was really exciting, and we often see that on the television and radio ads as well. And certainly last but not least, something that is near and dear to our hearts, October is National Disability Employment Awareness Month. And we're looking forward to participating in Governor Hochul's 3rd annual Disability Rights and Employment Awareness or DREAM Symposium, which is October 1st here at the Empire State Plaza. The event really is an opportunity to celebrate the value that disabled New Yorkers bring to the workforce through a variety of workshops and to assist in matching prospective qualified candidates with employers at a job fair. OPWDD also plans to celebrate the month by highlighting people with developmental disabilities who have shared their employment success stories with us. An updated employability toolkit for businesses will be made available on the OPWDD website, continuing to raise awareness for employers with a new video aimed at encouraging more businesses to employ people with developmental disabilities. Now I will hand it over to Kelly Stengel, who will provide you all with our progress on the new Medicaid data dashboards. Kelly, are you on?
Yes, I am. Thank you, Abiba. So thank you everyone for giving me a few minutes to talk today about our website update redesign and our Medicaid expenditure story. So I'm Kelly Stengel. I'm our Director of the Bureau of Population Health within our Division of Data Strategy and Management. Go to the next slide, please. So as part of OPWDD's strategic plan goals, we identified accessibility of data and stakeholder engagement as priority areas in our IT roadmap. And as such, we have been working on redesigning the layout of our website, as well as some of the data products that we release on our website to accomplish our strategic plan goals. So as part of this redesign, we wanted to improve the ease of use of our website by consolidating our data products from across different places on our website. We wanted to redesign the layout of our website to improve the flow. We wanted to develop new Medicaid expenditure stories to allow for interactivity with data, and I'll talk a little bit about that a little bit later in this presentation. We wanted to reduce excessive scrolling and allow for new content and data products to be added to our website easily. Go to the next slide, please. And so currently our data website, you can find a majority of our data products on the by the numbers page, which is located at opwdd.ny.gov/data. As you can see by this screenshot, it's really just meant to illustrate that the way that our website is designed is using a banner style, which requires scrolling down the web page to view all of the available content. And this banner style is really helpful for providing text-based information about services and supports, but we've realized it doesn't really lend itself well to some of the data products that we want to share. So if you can move to the next slide. This slide shows you an updated example of what our new data landing page will look like. And so within this new format, in working with communications, we have grouped our data products into tiles, which are the purple squares that you see on the page. Currently, we'll have three new areas of data products. The first is looking at spending. The next is workforce, and then we'll also have a tile for care coordination. But as I had mentioned, this website design will make it a little bit easier to read and provide a little bit more flexibility for us to create new tiles as we expand and release new data products. So some examples of some additional tiles that we anticipate for future updates include a tile for adult outcomes, one for performance measures, and one for housing. We'll go to the next slide, please. When you select one of those tiles on the data landing page, you would go to a subpage for the data. Here's an example of clicking on the spending tile, bringing you to the spending subpage. And so within these subpages, we can format and arrange our data products to allow users to navigate an increasingly granular view of the data and hopefully to have it be organized in a way that makes it easier for individuals to find different data products as we release them. As you can see on this example of the spending subpage, we have Medicaid data, products and reports. Our by the numbers infographic is linked in one of the tiles. And at the bottom section, you can see that there's 4 different storyboards. So these are our Medicaid stories. And the first that we released was our regional story for strategic planning. That story was released in 2023. And the goal of creating that story was to improve data accessibility and interactivity for our users and really hopefully promote like the ease of identification of patterns and trends within the data. Go to the next slide, please. And so a little bit more about the Medicaid expenditure stories. So these are a new format for the data book for strategic planning. We currently have that on our website on the data page as a PDF and Excel version of Medicaid data. And within both those PDF and Excel version, there's literally hundreds of tables with different looks at Medicaid expenditure data by different characteristics. And we wanted to take those 2 data products and really make them more interactive and also focus on different topical areas. So hopefully users have an easier time navigating some of our data. So the Medicaid expenditure stories provide a comprehensive overview of OPWDD Medicaid services, and Medicaid services account for an overwhelming portion of our financial impact for the IDD system. More than 95% of the people that are supported by OPWDD receive a Medicaid service within a given year. So one thing also to note about these dashboards is that because they are focused on Medicaid expenditures, it's not going to include non-Medicaid spending, for example, ISS or family support services. And as I had mentioned, we currently now will be releasing 4 different stories. We will have an update of our regional story. We'll have a new services story, a provider story, and a story looking at self-direction services. Go to the next slide, please. So an example of our regional data story for strategic planning, which you can currently find at our dashboard. As you can see, when you've selected one of the tiles on the previous example of the subpage, you would land on this regional data story for strategic planning page. Within that page, you will see that there's different tabs at the top of the page that allow users to navigate to different views within the storyboard. And on the various views, you'll also see filters, which allow individuals to interact with the data, and data will automatically update as you select different filters within the story. Can you go to the next slide, please? And so we provided one example of what the view will look like for the services story for strategic planning. So throughout the services story, filters allow users to focus on different service categories. So for example, if you're looking at the age and sex distribution amongst our population, this data can be filtered not only by year, but also by different service category, for example, certified residential services or community rehabilitation or other supports and services. Go to the next slide, please. On this slide, we provide an example of the provider agency story for strategic planning. So the view in this story is different than the previous two stories, where the first story of the regional story really provides a regional look at data across our service system. The services story looks by service category. The provider story looks at our provider agencies and provides counts of people supported by different service categories by provider. Within this story, you can also search by provider name if you want to get more details on a provider agency. If you can go to the next slide. Our last Medicaid service story is our self-direction story for strategic planning. Throughout this story, users can see the data by self-directing type. And within this story, not shown here, there's also a table which compares those who self-direct with budget authority to all others by service category and provides various other filters of looking at the data. So go to the next slide. That's just a very quick overview of some website updates that we're hoping to release in the next couple of weeks and some of the data products that can be found within our redesigned website. And if anyone has any questions, you can reach out to me. And then I will be turning it over to Jessica Pigeon, our Director of Strategic Planning and Engagement, for a brief update on the 507 plan.
Thank you, Kelly. Good morning, everyone. Twice for those in the room, because we were on mute. So happy to be here this morning to provide a very brief update on some of our strategic planning activities over the last few months. We wanted to share a quick update on our stakeholder engagement activities, the events that we host every summer. They provide space for us to share information, including updates on our strategic planning work. We also use the opportunities to try to find new innovative ways to engage different voices and communities and stakeholders, and we continue to expand our capacity in this realm this summer, which I'll talk a little bit about. And also we look at these events as an opportunity to provide an additional space for accountability, for you guys to hold us accountable as we provide updates every year on what we said we're working on, what we're working on, and our progress on our 5-year strategic plan. So by holding them every year, you know where to find us every year. Right. Next slide, please. So this summer we focused on several new parts of the state, as well as expanding our virtual forum offerings to engage new participants in our planning process. We held 7 in-person forums across the state and 5 virtual forums, with a total of 12. So our in-person forums were 2 hours long and included updates on our work, a new question and answer section, and an opportunity for the public to provide comment. We held forums in Long Island, Saratoga, Saranac Lake, Rochester, New City in Rockland County, and in the Bronx. All of the forums included ASL interpretation, and several included interpreters for other languages, including Spanish and Urdu. In Rochester and the Bronx, we were able to partner with 2 University Centers for Excellence in Developmental Disabilities in New York State, who often serve more diverse communities, with the hope of trying to further diversify who we're hearing from. In addition to those forums, we also partnered with 2 community-based organizations to hold a Spanish language forum in Harlem. So this forum was conducted almost exclusively in Spanish. It was hosted and facilitated by an OPWDD staff member who speaks Spanish, and we provided live interpretation from Spanish to English for our staff members who didn't speak Spanish, with very minimal English to Spanish when our acting commissioner and leadership were responding to questions. All the materials were provided in Spanish, and most of the public comments were provided in Spanish as well. So we received very positive feedback from participants and community members, and we're looking forward to expanding our capacity for more inclusive events like this in the future. We also held several virtual forums, as I mentioned, We hosted 2 virtual forums open to the public, one day and one evening session. We hosted a Chinese language virtual forum in collaboration with a community-based organization, which was also a bilingual event. And we hosted 2 forums for people who identify as self-advocates or someone who has lived disability experience in collaboration with SAMES, a statewide self-advocacy organization. Those forums were hosted and facilitated using plain language, both verbally and in our visuals. In total, we had over 700 people who participated in the 12 different forums, and we had approximately 200 people provide comment to us. Next slide, please. As I mentioned, a new addition to our forum format this year was a question and answer session. So people could submit questions in advance when they registered for the event to OPWDD. We reviewed the questions, combined similar and common questions, and then answered them at the forums. For questions, some people submitted questions that were a little bit more personal in nature, so we did not respond to those in the public setting venue. But we did have our regional office or state operations office staff connect with those people individually to respond to them and support them to get resolution. Of the questions that were submitted, most were related to self-direction, housing, eligibility, workforce, service access post-COVID, CCOs and care management, CAS and employment. There were a handful of other more specific topic questions related to language access, healthcare access, and stakeholder engagement as well. Next slide, please. So we're currently finalizing the analysis of all the questions, but also the feedback that we received through the public comment. But we have noticed several common themes and topic areas in the public comments that were provided, many of which are very similar to the list that you just saw for the questions that were submitted, by no surprise. So again, self-direction, housing, workforce, children and youth, eligibility and access to services, language access, cultural competency, and more stakeholder collaboration and engagement as we're trying to move the system forward. So we will be including a summary of feedback in our upcoming 2024 annual report, which will be released later this year. So you'll see a little bit more detail there. And we'll continue to use the feedback to inform our strategic planning and systems change activities moving forward. Next slide. So with that, I just wanted to take an opportunity to thank all of you who participated in the events. Some of you helped support the events and recruitment for the events. So I just wanted to thank you for your participation. You know, it's truly a collaborative effort and opportunity for us to work together. I know you all are very busy and you have a lot of priorities, so we appreciate your participation in our strategic planning process and activities every year. And I'll pass it to Dan.
Okay, thank you, Jessica. I believe we have a few more updates. I know you had a leave last meeting.
Yep.
Thanks, Alexis.
No problem. So for those of you who can't see my mouth matching my words, this is Alexis Harrington speaking, Associate Commissioner for Program Implementation and Service Access. So we wanted to just cover really quickly some high-level responses to the recommendations that were suggested and that we provided a written response to the respective co-chairs for both of those committees. So we'll start with residential and then round out with self-direction recommendations. So related to the residential recommendations, those were all specific to the housing subsidy ADM. I personally participated in that group with those who kind of pulled those recommendations together and just really appreciate the time and attention to the areas that really required some clarification, some nuanced areas that we may not have been able to anticipate until we launched the policy. So just high level, there were some areas that were requested, some clarification, including eligibility criteria, some clarification on other voucher programs, leases and lease expectations, the quality assurance expectations checklist, clarity on utilities, and transition stipends. So just in general, A majority of the recommendations were adopted, and right now we are working to tweak the ADM. I think you all know that our process for releasing ADMs requires some public comment. So you all will have several opportunities to review that language that we are proposing based on the conversations we had with the residential committee. The areas that we do want to just talk a little bit further with the residential committee on are related to the appropriateness of a work group being explored when it comes to the general statement about the housing quality assurance expectations and how that is kind of creating a burden. We want to have more conversations about that because that is kind of a broad topic to kind of throw out there. So we just need to really understand more specifics related to that and hope to have more conversations at the residential committee about that. And then when it comes to some regions reporting that voluntary provider agencies and care coordination organizations are reluctant to complete the QA checklist, that's again another area we want to have further dialogue on. And if there are any additional specific areas of concern versus the overall QA checklist, we would love to just have all of those specifics shared with us to kind of evolve that conversation and pinpoint exactly what it is that we need to make sure to address in our upcoming training and clarification in the ADM. And then the other area that we want to just have additional conversation with the residential committee about is regarding the comment about the preliminary approval process being ineffective at supporting people with a smooth transition into independent living due to concerns with timing related to final approval of subsidy calculation templates and self-direction templates. So that's just another area we want to have a very direct dialogue about to understand the specifics, because that is, you know, a large process to reference. So the more specifics we have, the better we'll be able to impact that. So that's residential. I don't know if you want me to just go right into. Okay.
Thank you, Alexis.
Yeah, no problem. So the general categories for the self-direction recommendations were streamlining processes, education and training, and strengthening oversight for quality. And just in general, those were three very strong areas, and we supported every recommendation. So we'll be having further conversations with the self-direction committee on how we roll that out. But we did receive the response in writing, where we further articulate our support for this and what those next steps might look like. So that is what I've got to report out. Thank you so much for sharing those recommendations and bearing with us to create this process on the fly. So if there are any questions, happy to answer.
Good idea.
Yeah, close.
Alexis, for members of the residential committee who haven't seen that yet, because we did just, we got it yesterday. I got it yesterday. I haven't had a chance to send it out to the full committee yet, but you did, we appreciate a very thorough job, you know, careful review of the recommendations and your response. So we will be distributing that to the residential committee, and it'll be, I think, the main agenda item for our next meeting later in October. So thank you.
Awesome. Thank you.
Any other discussion, questions? Alexis, on the recommendations? And we'll share those responses with the rest of the council. Thanks. Thank you, Alexis. Rachel, is a couple of them. You're all good? Great. All right. So now we're going to, before we go into the committee reports, actually, we're going to move to a vote on bylaws. We distributed a copy of the updated bylaws, and those bylaws have been discussed with the executive committee. We shared them with the membership. I just want to say,
Mr. Chairman, before we get into bylaws, weren't we supposed to have a discussion on the OPWDD report?
yes, thanks, Tom. Well, we opened it up for discussion, but
I thought it was only to the way you phrased it.
we can, no, it was open, but we can.
Well, I have several comments, and excuse me if I sound somewhat frustrated, because I'm a member of the disability community, as many others here are. And at this point, we're experiencing very severe challenges in every area. Let me first of all thank those who came today. I'd like to see us go to full in person as soon as possible so that we can have better dialogue. It's hard to have dialogue with screen. And we did have some representatives here today. And frankly, I found their report much more engaging and I could understand it better. And they're here. And they're here to answer any questions. And I would like to see us have everyone come in person if possible in the future. Secondly, I'm hearing a lot of discussion about procedures. And frankly, I'm very frustrated by all of the discussion about procedures. I'd like to hear a little bit more about actually what's happening. For example, what was the OPWDD budget last year and how much of it was spent? I had a call from someone saying, what's the story with family support services? Okay. How much is allocated to family reimbursement? How much was actually spent? Because people are having difficulty accessing that money. Since there was an ADM back in 2022 or something like that, this person believes the program's basically been shut down. Nobody can access the money. I don't know if that's true or not, but that's just one example. Okay? So I would ask that we get a copy of, or an analysis of what last year's Assembly budget, Senate budget, legislative budget that was passed is. How much was spent in each category? So we as a group can understand what is OPWDD actually doing. Procedural stuff is interesting. It's nice. It gives us an opportunity to participate, but we need the numbers to understand what we're participating in and whether we can to hold OPWDD accountable. The next one, guidelines, for example, the Guidehouse. How much did OPWDD pay Guidehouse to tell us what we all already knew? I didn't see anything in that report that I couldn't have written down on one piece of paper. So, that goes under the question of expenditure of monies. This is supposed to be an advisory group. Because before my time, did this group say spending, was it $10 million on that number? No, what was the number on Guidehouse? Do we know?
Wasn't that fair?
Okay, like whatever the number was, what did we learn from that report? And we spent all of that money that could have been used for services. So I'd like to have us take a little bit of a look at budget expenditures, what's being spent, what is it being spent? And if OPWDD needs some help lobbying the legislature, maybe that's a role that we should play if we see something that should be done.
Tom, can I hold you off just a minute? The information that Kelly, the dashboard, will that provide us with spending data?
Yeah, so I think high level, some of what you're talking about as far as the spending and some of the numbers, and you'll see it in the data dashboards that Kelly referred to. We also include some of that in the annual update every fall too. So you'll see it reflected in the strategic plan that was originally, shared 2 years ago. And then we provide updated data based on the same data that Kelly's talking about, which, we were refining how we're putting on the website. So a lot of that is publicly accessible through both the dashboards and our annual update.
How high level?
Well, the new dashboards that she's talking about actually allow you to go even more specific than we have in the past. So I would recommend looking at that data that she talked
When will
about
that be available?
shortly, both of them. That's why we're talking about it today.
The governor's now doing her budget, and OPWDD is now doing its budget. So
It's
we're gonna have
expected to
some
be out in
input.
the next few weeks to months, yeah.
Well, but now's the time for us to have that input to see.
Yeah, we understand and appreciate it, and I think you'll have it sooner than we might expect.
Okay.
And that will not be,
Technology, so I don't want to be like, yes, you'll have it tomorrow at 2
Just
p.m.
like-
because you never know.
just to be clear, that will not be for this current fiscal year. That would have been for the.
Correct, because as most people know who deal with data, it's never, right, like
It's
it's
always
not
lagging.
always lagging. That's just how data works, right?
What it would be helpful, as the chair just pointed out, for us to have some input into next year's budget. I mean, for example, how much right now are we spending on workforce? And we all know there's still a significant shortage of workforce. What is the plan? What is OPWDD going to do about that? What are you going to suggest to the governor that we put in there to supplement workforce? I mean, that's the kind of discussion I would like to see us have. You know, the agencies are having problems. Everybody's having problems getting workforce. The ads are very nice. But what I heard you say, or someone say, is as a result of the ads, there were a certain number of clicks on the website. Okay, well, how many people got hired? Nice to know what the clicks are. How many people got hired?
So is that a question now?
Yeah, that's a question. But I think this is where I'm going.
I know, but I want to give these folks a chance to respond. Okay, I know a lot of questions, so.
Yeah, so for the website, what we have the ability to track is how many clicks, because what it leads you to is to a provider's page. And so the person then goes to the provider's page, they see what jobs are available, and then they get hired, or they don't apply, they go through the process and they get hired. We unfortunately don't have the ability to track once they've gotten to the provider's page, how they've gotten, if they've gotten hired or not. That's just based on how the campaign is designed, which is to attract attention to the career and get people interested in joining the workforce. So what we have available right now is really the traffic that's being driven to the webpage, which is more than we've ever had in the past.
Well,
And we do have conversations with the providers on a regular basis who are participating. So whether or not they build that into their tracking, I know some of them have been considering that, and or, you know, we have constant communication. So hopefully we'll be able to see, maybe not as detailed as like Medicaid data, but have some information on potential outcomes. But that's just one of several workforce initiatives that we talk about in our strategic plan updates. So I just want to make that clear too, like the marketing campaign is a very big, you know, promising one, but there's all the other work that we spoke about at many meetings with SUNY, with credentialing, with the funding, you know, rebasing. So I do encourage, you know, I know it's a little bit to read a report, but there's so much that we've been doing and there's so much work that's reflected that we get a lot of questions about, including some of these questions that we do provide pretty substantial updates on every.
So what I would suggest is that when the data is published, right, the lagging data from last year, that we'll make sure that everybody gets the links to that data. And then secondly, you know, as we develop the agenda for the next meeting, which would be in December, perhaps we could have a discussion on what your priorities and that would give everybody a chance to review the data before that meeting and then ask any questions of that.
Mr. Chairman, I think my point is clear. I'm more interested in what's the results. I applaud all of the efforts, but there's no way we can have input if we don't understand if these efforts are actually bearing fruit. Is there an increase in the workforce from one year to the other? Now, I realize that you don't necessarily have that stuff handy, but got to somehow get the data from everybody out there. Are we making progress? From what I understand, we're not making a lot of progress. I mean, I talked to some providers and they've had minimal problems because they are paying $18 an hour when around the corner, you know, Amazon's paying $25 an hour. So maybe they've hired a couple of more people than they had before just to make up for the people who have left.
Is there any data that you can show whether or not we're actually filling minutes of service?
So I don't think we have anything available for today, Nick, just.
Not today, but
Yeah,
I'm saying in the future, that might be something that we can.
I think we can take it back. I think the one thing that I think is exciting about all our ARPA workforce work is that we actually have an evaluation going along with it.
Great.
To see what is working, what's not working, how is it working, right? Is it helping with recruitment? Is it helping with retention? Is it helping with job satisfaction and actually quality of care that's being delivered? Because some of the work we're doing isn't just about getting more people into the job, it's getting them to be better and more confident in their jobs. Which could result in you needing less people to do the work, right? If you have someone who's confident, feels secure, wants to stay in the job and is happy, it's a better experience for the person that's really receiving the services as well. So I know we're taking a lot of notes on our side and we don't have that today, but you can see. Yep.
And I just want to address something that there was some comments about whether or not we could actually show the person who was speaking. Unfortunately, the cameras in this room don't allow us to zoom in on the speakers, but we can certainly take down the slide while we're, you know, transitioning to maybe give people a little bit bigger view of what's going on here in Albany, but you're never going to see the speaker because of the, you know, the cameras.
And this is Rachel Baker for the person that's been speaking. So
Yes, I could ask everybody that before you ask a question, to identify yourself. I saw Sumantra, your hand up, and then Kristen.
Hi, Sumantra Sarkar here. I'm just wondering, is there the list of dashboard, the priority of what is this? I know there's quite a lot of work to be done, but is there a priority list of what dashboards comes in first to be published? Because that might be a good input to this case also, that if you have a list of dashboard mutually settled, we can sort of take those questions one at a time.
Yeah, and I don't want to speak on behalf of Kelly, but I think when she was alluding to our, I sound like a broken record, but our strategic plan, we put a timeline around some of the work that we're doing with data and our data infrastructure, including those dashboards, right, in the strategic plan. So that includes some of the topics, but Kelly or Dr. Tamika Black, if you're on, want to correct me if any of that's wrong, please feel free to do so. This was Jessica Pittman, apologies.
Hello, everyone. My name is Tamika Black. I am the Deputy Commissioner of the Division of Data Strategy and Management and OPWDD's Chief Data Officer. I really appreciate today's questions. The dashboards, I think, that are in question will be released all at the same time. And we are in the process of, again, not only completing the website redesign, posting all 4 dashboards, which look at the data through the lens of region, service, provider, and self-direction, as well as producing an infographic that talks about the entire service system and spending. And so those may be helpful tools. Those may be helpful tools as everyone is thinking about understanding the service system and where dollars are going. Then we have additional activities associated with the strategic plan that not only includes the release of data products, but delving into performance measurement and preparing for the CMS access rule, and also looking at being able to predict future utilization and capacity needs in the system, consistent with our strategic plan timeline.
Thanks, Tamika.
I think we had Kristen.
I just wanted to pick up on what Rachel said about retention, because I think it is important to remember that some of the initiatives in the OPWDD direct support professional portfolio are aimed at recruitment, like the branding marketing campaign, but other initiatives like the micro-credentialing in particular and the partnership with SUNY are aimed at retention. And I would be interested also in hearing about some of the measurements as that's tracked in terms of the recruitment efforts, because or the retention efforts rather, because certainly retention, I think, helps in a variety of ways, right? It helps with the sheer numbers of people in the workforce, but it also goes to the quality of care, right? Goes to the reliability of the workers. First of all, they're showing up for their shifts. The agencies are not scrambling to get in per diem staff to cover, but it also goes to the quality of the workforce, the continuity of care, and the comfort level that individuals with developmental and other disabilities feel with their caregivers, right? Because it's predictable, they know the people, relationships get built, and I think it's really hard to put a value on that. So I think that those retention efforts are, I don't want to say equally as important, but I think that I am happy to see OPWDD has paid attention on parallel tracks to both of those simultaneously, both recruitment. Obviously, we all know that there need to be more direct support professionals in the field, but keeping those individuals in the field, right? It's a big investment on the part of whether it's the state operated programs or the voluntary agencies to invest in recruiting and training staff. And I think that these initiatives from OPWDD, particularly the micro-credentialing, are going a long way to help support those professionals so that they feel more confident and they are wanting to stay in those jobs for a longer period of time and be better caregivers and support providers themselves.
Mr. Chair, I don't disagree with what you were just saying, but we could get that measurement as well. We could ask the providers to tell us how many people left. I mean, these are the kinds of numbers that we should be hearing.
Request one. Yeah, Gary? Gary, could you identify yourself?
Gary Goldstein, Health and Wellness Committee. What percentage or how much data is there on doctor's visits, various types, mental health visits, dental visits, medical visits, different type of specialties? Do you have any focus on that in the data? For example, there was operating room issues for people with developmental disabilities because the reimbursements were too low. We had a bump, the last commissioner got a nice bump for that. Is it working? What's the outcome? We don't have, we're still lacking outcome measures that we've been asking for. And I understand it's being worked on. Are you working on that? And also, what is present in each, and Jill Pettinger is working on getting a handle on what's available in each of the Article 16 and 28 clinics. Is that part of this, or is that a separate initiative, or how is that working?
So I think Tamika could speak to like our, what data we have that's shared in the dashboard related to specifically health. I think as far as outcomes from, the recently passed, updates to the fees and everything, it's probably too soon for that, right? To see how much, because that was just in the recent budget. So usually it takes a few years for us to actually see outcomes. But Tamika, if you don't mind speaking, briefly to some of the health related data that we have, either through the Medicaid data or NCI even.
Thank you, Jessica. We are in the process of looking at to your point, health and wellness information through National Core Indicators data. And in the process of sort of refining some of the dashboards to be released next spring around some of those metrics. And they look at screening, they look at doctor's visits and other information. We are also looking at information that might be available through the Life Plan Data Exchange, which is the information we get from CCOs as part of the life planning process and other data sources. What we would appreciate from the DDAC is a sort of documentation of the different types of questions and requests so that OPWDD can take that back and take a closer look at what's of interest to the committee members.
Paul. This is Paul Jocelyn. I just want to suggest before we discuss reaching out to providers to get data on their staffing situations, that we look to see what other resources exist already. For example, the New York Disability Advocates does a survey of providers every 6 months or so. There's over 100 providers that participate in that and provide both turnover and vacancy data for their staff. And that might be a much more streamlined way of providing this group with some actionable data. I can tell you from seeing their most recent survey that their last survey did show a slight improvement in staffing across providers.
Great. Thanks, Paul. Other Sumatra?
What Tamika said, I think Sumatra, Tamika said is right. If we can, because the dashboards, what they presented might not satisfy the queries that we have. So if we can make a list within the DDAC as to the questions that Tom raised, it will be good for them to sort of look into it. Not all of them will be available because of the data lag. And data availability, that's also possibly a challenge. So if you can make a list within an annually to sort of start that process to have all of this, especially data-oriented questions. What are we looking for? Budget against the spend in last year. What is the budget for this year? That might be a good helpful measure for Jessica and Tamika to take it forward.
Thank you for volunteering, Sumatra.
Yeah, so I didn't mean to interrupt you, Nick. I know we'll talk about it a little bit later, very high level. But we do have a data committee practice that is housed within DDAC too, the systems committee that we have kicked off recently. So I think a lot of this conversation and understanding about the data that we have, maybe don't have, some of the lag in the data, a lot of that is planned to happen in that subgroup and then be shared more broadly. So, before we do extra work, well, you all do extra work, it might make sense for us to kind of think about how what you were talking about here does or doesn't align with and connect with the data community practice that's already, starting to get up and running.
And will in Dolores, you might be able to comment on this, the data committee of practice, will that actually survey the different committees as to what data they might need in order to formulate the recommendations?
Well, we had a kickoff meeting just last week. Yes, it's Dolores and Bratton. So the kickoff was just last week. I was on the call for a short time because Michael is really co-sharing that with Jessica. So I don't have that information.
Yeah, so some of the initial stages of that will be kind of us talking about and sharing what our capacity is, some of the data that Tamika's been talking about and Kelly kind of alluded to. So we'll go through some of that. And then I think, generally speaking, along the way, we'll be hearing about what other committees might be interested in. If we're talking about what other committees are interested in, we can talk about how that's shared, throughout the whole structure. That was part of why we kind of did it with the systems, because we know the systems committee is broad, right? And it can touch housing, the housing committee's work, the health and wellness work, children's work. So part of our participation and kind of helping to co-facilitate that is because we have, a handful of us staff who participate across different committees, including myself, so we can kind of be pulling that together and making those connections. So we're not duplicating efforts or conversations.
Very good, thank you. Right.
I think it's also important for us this great nights. I think it's also important for us to establish we have a number of committees and committees are doing some amazing job. But it's good to identify what exactly each committee is tasked with doing. What exactly are we trying to solve? Right? Because I was talking to Kirk, if we're going to think about residential, for example, there's a host of areas. So you say the residential, what exactly are we going to tackle? Right? There's like multiple parts of that. So, but if we don't stop, it seems like we're going to be all over the place. And I'm about solving problems, not constantly talking about them. So I think it's to identify for each committee what is the objective we're looking to do. Here are the top 10 things we want to solve. We're going to start on this one, and then we're going to see it. We're going to test that out, see how that works. But
this is part of the responsibility of the committee chair, to identify what the focus is of the committees, working together with the committee members.
So if each committee member can share with the team what exactly they're looking to solve, that would be very helpful.
Thanks, Ray.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I wasn't done. I guess I started the conversation, but I have a little bit more I'd like to add.
All right.
The purpose that I see.
For other members, though.
Yeah, I will. I was quiet. It's not going around. We go around again. Purpose of the data is not just to have the data. It's to see whether we're going in the right direction. Let me say, for example, like housing. Okay, we know that generally speaking, there's about 5,000 people who want certified housing. Okay, so has that number increased? Has that number decreased? And how many people were placed over the last year? What is OPWDD's plan to take care of these 5,000 people? That's the way I look at this. It's like we know that there are at least another 5,000 people out there who want non-certified housing. Okay, what's the plan? And is that number increasing and decreasing? What is the plan? I haven't heard that. I hear a lot about the discussion. It's good that we're coming in, we're meeting with all these people. What's the result of all of these meetings? I will tell you that, in the crisis response, what is being done? How many calls is OPWDD getting? Are you keeping track of them? And are you farming them out? How are you responding to them? I'm no longer in the legislature. I got 3 calls over the last 3 days from people in crisis. Why'd you call me? I said, we don't know who else to call. We know your name. I said, well, I'm not with OPWDD. I'm not with the legislature. I can give you some personal advice, but who do I call at OPWDD with these crisis calls? When they call me, when they call any member of DDAC. When somebody hears you're on this committee, they got to call you. And so who do you call it? I haven't heard that coming back from OPWDD. So these are the kinds of questions that I have that I'd like to have us talk about.
I'm going to let OPWDD respond. Alexis.
Hi, it's Alexis Harrington, for those who can't see me. So just to respond to the first part of your question, Tom, about who to call, I think everybody is aware that the point of contact that is the most reliable to reach out to is your respective regional field office. They all have crisis points of contact, so that's a great first start. I'd love to talk offline a bit more about it being in crisis. Like, I'm not sure if you're talking about somebody who might be connected to crisis services already. If that's the case, then there is obviously a crisis line that can be reached for those who are already enrolled. There's a referral line, so I'm more than happy to talk offline for the list of resources outside of the regional field office, but that would always be the point of contact we should be referring the public to. Not anybody at central office. They are not going to reach out to you in a timely manner for a crisis. That is what the regional field offices are for. So hopefully that part is helpful. Yeah, so anything else, go ahead.
Can you distribute to all of us the telephone numbers for the crisis response?
Yeah, absolutely. It's on our website. We got a crisis section, but I'm happy, yeah.
Because one person who called me last night, said she's been waiting for a return call from the regional office for 3 days.
Okay.
And this is a real crisis.
Yep.
Police are involved. It's at a group home.
Tom, can I suggest,
Yeah,
in
I'm
the
just-
interest of time, because we need to move out of the agenda, Tom.
I just wanted to make the point that we need to have it for that, and we need to be able to use it to form policy. Thank you.
I'm gonna, Gary, one more, and I do, it is on the website, and it is.
It's very prominent too, I just looked it up.
Yeah,
The ombudsman program. So could you give an example of when somebody might call that? For example, in the medical needs, somebody might need a tooth extracted and they can't get services in their region. They're waiting until there's no Medicaid provided. Do they call that ombudsman now? Who do they call?
Yeah, so I mean, I think there's a lot of different examples of what we expect or assume that folks will call it. Sorry, apologies, Jessica Pigeon, OPWDD. What people will use the ombudsman for, I think if there are, any challenges that are being faced that folks are unable to, attain access or the information that they think is helpful, then they can, reach out to the ombudsman once it's up and running. I would assume there might be, for example, people who, are having challenges finding the, pulling together paperwork that they need, for one of our services or eligibility or something. So maybe they would reach out to the ombudsman, somebody who might be struggling with their CCO or care manager potentially could reach out. So I think, we're interested to see what people will utilize it for, but we think it's going to be pretty broad. The contractor that we have, the vendor, I think is, really excited to help support people. They do a lot of stuff in the health space already, so there might be opportunities for them to leverage some of those existing relationships and information. They work with the Department of Health, they work with the Office of Substance Abuse, they work with the Office of Mental Health. So I think there'll be an opportunity for them to support people to find access to stuff if that's out there, but we know it's challenging. And just a general comment before we move on, which I think it sounds like we're about to do. We definitely hear you all and what you're talking about related to data, related to outcomes, specifically related to the work that we're doing. All of it is connected to our strategic planning. I think, as we continue to move forward with strategic planning, our data infrastructure, you'll continue to see more and more of what you're asking for. So we look forward to continuing to have the conversations and getting your feedback as we, collaboratively work together to move the system forward.
thank you, Jessica. Okay. Let's move on to the agenda. The next topic, before we get into committee reports, is the approval of the bylaws. Again, we sent all the membership a copy of the revised bylaws. We're trying to keep these current. We know that the bylaws in the current, the current form are always going to be changing. We're always going to be making new edits. So this probably won't be the last time we update the bylaws, but a lot of work has gone into revising these bylaws. We reviewed them with the executive committee. Dolores has put a lot of effort into the bylaws, and we thank you for all the work. Did you want to make any comments, Dolores, on the bylaws? No. Okay. Just wanted to get the opportunity. So again, the bylaws were distributed. I'll just open it up for discussion and then ask for a motion to approve those bylaws. So moved, Jeff. Second, thank you, Teresa. All right. All in favor of approving the new bylaws as submitted? Okay. And I'll ask the different sites, because again, we're going to have to identify who's making the motion at the different sites. Long Island? Long Island, huh? Where are you? Let's go to Syracuse. Dan?
Approve.
Thank you. Buffalo?
Buffalo approves.
Thank you, Susan. Go back to New York. John?
I approve.
Long Island? How about a thumbs up? We can see you. Okay, thank you. All right, any objections? Any abstentions? Okay, the bylaws have been passed.
Just want to remind everybody that we do have guidelines that go along with the bylaws, and you all have copies of them.
Thank you, Dolores.
Long Island here.
Oh, very good.
They got it already.
I know you got us approval, but we really can't hear. And if you could just put the screen, get the committee report down and put the big screen, put Albany up, we'd be able to participate better.
Yeah, I think you need to do that at your end.
No,
Yes.
no, it's not our end.
You can change the view.
No.
Because we're hearing here that we can't do it.
You can't remove your committee report right there that takes up the whole screen here? We can't remove it, but it takes up the whole screen. And anybody speaking, we really can't delineate who that
Jerry, let's
is.
see if we can get you some help here.
Yeah, hey Jerry, I don't know if this will help, and just as, you know, just a reminder of what Nick said, we can help you talk about how to pin the conference room here. You won't necessarily be able to see faces or anything like that. We don't have that technology, although we are looking at updating our technology, hopefully for next year for DDAC, so that there's more of that capacity. But if you go to the top, you should have an option to change your view. And then you can click on the conference room once you see like the different pictures of folks or the video. You can pin, if you click on the little bubble that says more options in the conference room, you can move to stage, kind of like pins our room next to the committee report PowerPoint. Well, I think we're working to, you know, try to navigate on our side too, because there's a way to kind of do a spotlight, but that's a way you can do it from your.
It's your screen sharing that takes up the entire screen. Your
Yes,
screen.
it might be a way that somebody there has it set up there, so, you know, if we can't help to get it figured out this meeting, then we'll make sure that we have a better situation for next time. Yeah.
Can we get rid of screen sharing?
We're working on it, Jerry. All right, I'm gonna move on and we'll continue to work on that from our end.
Okay.
Let's move into the committee reports. I know we have some recommendations. We'll start with the residential committee. Kirk?
Thanks, Nick. This is Kirk Lewis, the chair of the residential committee, and we do have a couple of recommendations. Just before I get to those, we have been meeting. Our regular meeting time is the third Tuesday of each month at noon. So it took us a little while to get that settled, but and I had a discussion with Ray before the meeting. He's interested in joining the committee. DDAC members are welcome. We did welcome one additional non-DDAC member to our committee this summer as well, Melanie Donis. And to Ray's point, talking about one of the things we've been working on as a committee is a charter, just kind of outlining what the committee is and how it will function. And we will, we voted on that as a committee. We haven't presented that to the executive committee yet. We want to do that, but we will bring that to the full DDAC as kind of, again, a guide.
We actually have the
We view as our scope of operations. With respect to the recommendations, we have,
Yeah, we're gonna pull them up.
okay. I think it's the
Next slide.
sorry. So we've had 3 meetings and we actually have come up with 3 recommendations. We have a third that I'll explain in a minute. It's not on the screen, but this was in the agenda that was sent out. And the first recommendation is with respect to housing navigation services, and it's a request that the DDAC approve a recommendation to OPWDD that funding for housing navigation services be included in individually directed goods and services, IDGS services that are paid for through self-direction. So this came to us, I'm going to ask John actually to give a little more background about both housing navigation services, for those who don't know what that means, and where this recommendation comes from. John?
Thanks, Kurt. So housing navigation services are a coordinating, occasional service. It's not an ongoing service, but where a housing navigator works with a person's circle of support, including their care manager, if they have self-direction, their self-direction broker, their representative payee, their fiscal intermediary, if they have a financial planner, their financial planner. In other words, a broad group of professionals. The housing navigator is the one who brings those folks across the silos and helps them to understand the steps necessary to help somebody to get from where they are, whether that be their family home or it be a certified setting or some other living situation, to where they want to be. And it's deeply rooted in person-centeredness, but it covers a lot of ground, including financial benefits, whether it be public benefits or private benefits, the things to take into consideration when locating, how to organize services, how to organize transitions, and how to make sure that the person is sustained when they finally get to their housing. And this was back in 2015, the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, who oversee Medicaid, told states that they would approve housing support services as part of a waiver because they believed that it was proven effective at helping people to move from, particularly from institutional and semi-institutional settings. And in 2022, the Council on Developmental Disabilities and the New York Alliance published a report that showed that a pilot program that had been carried out in New York State had been not only effective in terms of outcome for the people involved, but also fiscally effective. Back in 2017, OPWDD participated in creating a template that would enable it to become a waiver service, a 1915 waiver service. That process was sidelined when we went first to an 1115 waiver. And then when we came back to a 1915 waiver, it was not included in that. And then we had a pandemic. But for the last several years, we have been trying to make this into a waiver service, and it's been just held back on every year. Originally, we discussed having it as an IDGS service, and were discouraged from doing so because it would have conflicted with the goal of making it a full Medicaid waiver service. But that's been almost 10 years since we first saw the possibility of having housing navigation as a waiver service, and now it's time to actually move it along. So we believe that in addition to the current ways that a provider of housing navigation can be recompensed, which are primarily through self-direction brokerage services or community habilitation, that we should add in the possibility of people using it as an individual directed goods and service and be funded through that stream. So that was the recommendation of the residential committee to the council.
So, on behalf of the committee, I want to make the motion then that the full DDAC recommend to OPWDD that housing navigation services be approved for compensation through IDGS. So that's the committee's motion, and can have discussion or questions. Exactly.
Do you want to do the second? Do you want to do all three recommendations and then we just accept the committee recommendations, or do you want to do?
Why don't we do them one at a time in case
that's fine. Questions? Okay.
Yeah.
Mr. Chair?
Yeah.
I second your, if it hasn't already been seconded.
Okay.
And want to follow up with, I'd also like to, once we move forward beyond this, we'd like to see if we can get some responses to what the barriers are. Now, I don't know how we get that information, maybe back from OPWDD or from some housing navigators to find out what are they finding is a problem with getting people housing. This is your recommendation is a good one. And now the next step in my mind is, okay, you guys are going to do this. What are the barriers that you're hitting? Come back and tell us.
So all in favor of housing renovation services, inclusion,
Nick, before we bring over, just have a quick question. Ray Knights. So this role, that person is going to be bringing the group together. How is that different from that of a service coordinator?
John can explain in greater detail, but a housing navigator is specifically trained and works through a variety of agencies, systems, and services to help people. And as John said, it is a very person-centered approach. It deals with that person in the community they want to live with and ties them in. So it involves more training and more support than your typical care manager would have. John, we welcome your addition to that.
Not much to add to that, Kirk. I mean, the process can take as much as a year or more. It's intensive. It's not an interdisciplinary team meeting that happens every 6 months and takes 50 minutes. It's many hours of actually understanding the person in depth and really what they really need, rather than the prejudices that we all might have when we begin that housing process. And so it's really out of the context of regular day-to-day care management.
Mr. Chairman, don't we already have housing navigators? This is just a recommendation that they be paid through this other funding stream.
Yes, correct.
There is a group of people out there who are doing this already, but it's all, my understanding is it's available only those who can afford to private pay.
Right now, if I could just contradict, if I could just say, Tom, there are ways that it can be paid for through self-direction, brokerage, and through community habilitation. Those are not particularly well compensated and don't necessarily align with the level of skills necessary to be a successful housing navigator. There are about 400 plus housing navigators who've gone through training. Some of them work for CCOs and act as an internal resource. Some of them work for provider agencies and actually practice as housing navigators, but also serve as an in-house source of expertise for their colleagues. And some of them work for developers, and some of them work in the private pay sector. But there is plenty of ways that people can access it. It's just a question of incentivizing people to actually do the work when the compensation doesn't align with the skills required.
This is another funding stream.
It's a better funding stream than what we have, right?
Right.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Any other discussion on this recommendation before we go to?
If it's possible, I just wanted to add a comment. It's Alexis. I know we'll have plenty of time to talk about this if it moves forward and whatnot. But I did just want to flag, Ray, you raise a good question, right? There is a care coordination component that is built into our system already, and housing is a very core kind of required thing that people need to be stable, right? So a care manager is not going to ignore the fact that somebody does not have stable housing. So that is going to require a lot of conversation and coordination so that there are very clear roles and responsibilities outlined, and very close collaboration with care managers and care coordinators, because it could be duplicative. There is an expectation that housing is part of that day to day. So just want to say, great question. It's in my brain too, but we'll have plenty of time to talk more about that. So.
Any other discussion? Motion?
Motion. Made and seconded, I believe.
Okay. All right. All in favor? Okay. Well, sites, I see hands up. Thank you. All right. That is accepted by the DDAC. Second recommendation, sir.
The second recommendation comes from the residential committee. Had a housing policy subcommittee in place that worked for several months, if not more than a year, looking at really looking at all the issues impacting housing availability for people with developmental disabilities, and how New York can respond and work as it develops its 507 plan. The committee came up with the recommendation that a commission, I'm looking for the right word, a commission be convened that can pull together the necessary data, expertise, and information as a complement to the work that the state is doing on the 507 plan to address housing solutions really for the next decade, to be a very forward-looking effort. So, and again, I'm going to ask John, because John was instrumental with the subcommittee, if you want to provide some further information there.
Sure. Thank you, Kirk. First of all, just to Alexis's comment, I will say that when we worked all together to see what we could find after a year or so of experience with the housing subsidy ADM, it was a really productive process. And I think that this is a way to operate between the liaison folks from OPWDD and the DDAC's committees to actually achieve productive results. I'm very grateful for that. As you heard from Jessica, housing is a concern for many people. And to Tom's comment that there are people on the waiting list, the problem is that we're going to need to serve tens of thousands of people over the next decades. It's not a question of, do we have an immediate crisis? So the committee met 6 times beginning a year ago. There were 9 members, included 4 parents, a sibling, 4 providers, 2 MDs, 1 care coordination organization representative, 1 self-directing family member, which obviously adds up to more than 9, but some people were more than one thing. We presented a report to the committee, which is now available to the council. This report begins with the reasons for concern, and I'm sure everyone on this council could add other issues and could make many suggestions about how to mend the certified system or how to make it easier to live in non-certified housing. And we all have lived experience of that. However, we did not seek to say one system is better than another or to make suggestions about how to fix things, tempting though that might be. We simply sought to highlight some concerns and why we urgently need a housing policy that will enable us to meet the future. We were also clear about what our task was not. It was not about fixing the current system or eliminating any formats for current housing. It was about creating new choices and options. We highlighted best practices because public policy and equitable public expenditure need to be driven by empirical data and research. We list some of those best practices as food for thought and guidance for future policymakers, but it is hardly an exclusive list. More research needs to be done, for example, as to what works in other states and countries that has not been tried or that hasn't worked in New York. What we listed are practices that arise from the research and which should be considered by policymakers because in large part, we are not currently implementing the best practices that we know exist. We concluded with our recommendation as to where to go from here. We recognize the limitations of the subcommittee, the committee itself, and the DDAC. We are not equipped, nor do we have a mandate to create a housing policy. What we can do is to recommend that OPWDD develop a policy group to include all of the stakeholders, plus others that I'm sure we've omitted, that will seek to create policies and guidelines for housing that include all of the people with intellectual and developmental disabilities who need support. In terms of the groups or the people that should be part of that, the public, first of all, people with intellectual developmental disabilities, including people living in state-operated and voluntarily operated housing, their family members, their advocates and organizations, provider associations, including fiscal intermediaries, supported employment, care coordination organizations, and self-direction brokers, independent living centers, primary care physicians, behavioral health professionals, hospitals, home care agencies, the Bar Association in Elder and Disability Law. We should include OPWDD, OMH, OASIS, all of the O agencies basically, Homes and Community Renewal, the Office of the State Controller, Division of Human Rights, Disability Rights, the Regional Headquarters for Social Security, New York State Association of Counties, the New York State Conference of Local Mental Health Directors, and parallel New York City agencies, including the Department of Social Services and Homes and Preservation Development. And we should include housing creators, people who actually build housing, municipal and county planners, legal and financial professionals, landlords and builders associations. And we should include university centers of excellence, the Council on Developmental Disability, and USAID institutions around the country and elsewhere providing research support.
Thank you, John. I just want to add one comment. We discussed this fairly extensively at the residential committee meeting where we approved this coming forward. And I think the question was raised, couldn't you say the same about really every aspect of the service sector, that we should have a commission to study it? But I think as the list of organizations that are involved in housing that John just went through, and all of those organizations or all of those people, entities impact housing options. Housing is a particularly challenging problem. And we know the governor has highlighted it in her budget messages and her state of the state priorities. It is a priority across the state. It is a particularly challenging area for people with developmental disabilities. And we have to look at a current system. About a quarter of the people who OPWDD serves are presently in certified housing. There's a big network built up there. How do we integrate that, work with that, and build new options and build a financially viable system for the future? So I do think it merits this. The committee unanimously agreed after a good discussion. So on behalf of the committee, I will make the motion that the DDAC recommend to OPWDD and maybe to the legislature that a commission be created to develop housing policy for the next decade. That's my motion.
Second?
Second.
Paul Johnson will be the second. Any other discussion? All in favor?
Hi, I'm sorry, I tried to raise my hand in time. This is Randy D'Antonia. I just want to make sure on the list of stakeholders, I didn't hear it, and maybe it was said that employees and employee representatives are included. I mean, we are the folks that actually work in these agencies, so it would be really important to hear our voice. Thanks.
Thanks, Randy. Okay. Motion passed.
Excellent, thank you. One last item that came up at our last meeting, and we didn't have time to get it to the DDAC Executive Committee, but we deemed it to be important enough that we did want to bring it to the full DDAC today. There is a support service known as transitional, and I may get this wrong, so I may ask for some help. Transition funding for individuals seeking subsidies, individualized housing subsidies. And there's been a discrepancy across the state in the different regions as to accessibility of that transition funding, where in some cases, individuals have thought they were eligible, they haven't accessed it before, but they've been denied that funding because they've been living in an independent situation. It wasn't their first attempt at moving to independent housing. We discussed this. This is a small piece of the arc of services that are offered and provided by OPWDD, but it is highly significant to individuals who are in the process of trying to transition into supported housing with a housing subsidy, and all of a sudden they find that they don't have access to the funding that they thought was going to be available. So the committee, the residential committee did vote, remove my glasses, to recommend that OPWDD, we asked the DDAC recommend that OPWDD address this and issue communication to the regional office staff and providers to clarify the eligibility for the housing subsidy transition stipend. Again, I'll make that as a motion that came from the committee and ask for a second.
I'll second. Okay, so Kirk, I'm a little bit confused. Are you looking for a reaction from OPWDD to that concern? I mean, is that actually the recommendation?
Well, ultimately, we would like, that's what we would like.
You want clarification on the transition subsidy?
And we would like the support of the DDAC in requesting that. From what I've been told, it's been raised, and it's, again, the answers have not been entirely consistent. So,
Yeah, I want to follow up on your comment. It sounds to me like they're not looking just for clarification. They're looking for a clarification that it's available to everyone in a certain class. You want the broadest interpretation that's being used in some of the regions.
yes,
Correct?
yeah, if people have not accessed the housing subsidy, regardless of their living situation prior to that, we believe it should be available to them.
So this is Alexis in the room. I just wanted to let you know that we are aware of this. Obviously, the way the ADM is worded right now, we have been supporting the regional field offices in how they have been implementing this consistently. I think where there's a breakdown is where the point in time that people are comparing to, this is how it has always been done versus when the ADM was in place. So I think part of the challenge is the way that it is currently worded. So that is something that we are looking into to understand how we can better clarify that and kind of target exactly what it is that you're noting. So I just want to put that out there. We have supported the field offices in how they are interpreting that and implementing it, and it is something that we are looking into. I know you want to make that formal motion for it to be elevated, so absolutely go forward and do that. But I want you to know we're not going to wait for that to go through all the bureaucratic levels to respond to that. So just so you know.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, I'm sorry to interrupt so many times, but was the answer that everything was fine until the ADM was put in place and then it was further restricted?
I'm sorry, can you say that again?
Yes, it sounded to me, maybe I'm misinterpreting what you're saying,
Mhm.
that the old way of doing this was what the residential committee is asking for, but that it was the new ADM, whenever that was put into effect, that further limited the availability of that monies.
Yeah, so that's what we need to talk more about at the residential committee is understanding, was it that point in time that the ADM was issued? Or were there bits and pieces of the state that might have been interpreting it differently? So that's what I think we need to have an offline conversation about just to get the specifics.
Sounds like
Because again, these recommendations shouldn't be made to the DDAC without first going through the DDAC. So there are some questions here. What I would suggest is that we obviously have agreement from OPWDD to look into this, and that we defer any major vote on another recommendation until the next meeting. But in the meantime, we will follow up with residential.
Yes, absolutely. I think it's gonna come down to a policy change, right? The way it's read right now, it's being implemented correctly. So we will need to revise the language to the ADM to make that more clear.
That's all? Yeah. Okay. Great. All right. I'm gonna move on. Children's Services Committee, Jeff, are you going to report?
Is this on?
Yes.
Okay, great. This is Jeff Fox. I'm co-chair of the Children's Services Committee. This is still a relatively new committee. We're about a year old at this point. And I'm happy to say that we do have a recently set schedule of meetings, which is great. Our last meeting was on August 5th, and we started with a presentation on a mobile app that's designed to assist children and adults and their families navigate the complex system of services and supports in New York State that's set to launch this Thursday. It's known as Bill B and funded by the Council on Developmental Disabilities. And if anybody wants more information on this, please reach out to me. It's going to be a game changer for families and people with disabilities in New York. It'll be free and available to anybody from all across the state, from Long Island to the Adirondacks to Buffalo. So it's really exciting. We also had a presentation from Dr. Jill Pettinger with OPWDD on OPWDD's work with OMH and the development of home-based crisis services for children, which is in development. You might know about this, but they're in progress, and we're excited to see that all coming to fruition. A lot of our work is really coming to center around experiences with and obstacles with applications for the Medicaid waiver. And, we're working on ways with Rachel and Jessica primarily on how we gather data on those experiences so we can, hopefully that process for people. It's really important, I think, as most of you know, about a third of the people receiving OPWDD services are children, and that proportion is growing. So it's incredibly important. Another major area we're working on with OPWDD is the development of a comprehensive directory of state-funded services such as family support services, especially for people who aren't able for one reason or another to access the waiver. It's important for them to be able to know what services are available and where. So we're working on that. At our next meeting, Suzanne Bowling, who is oversees the non-district unit at the state education department, is going to join the committee as a regular participant to address cross-systems issues with OPWDD and the state education department. So we're really looking forward to that. And it looks, we don't have formal recommendations at this point, but we're working our way to what looks like probably two that we'll be presenting to the DDAC executive committee in the coming weeks or months.
Thanks, Jeff. Any questions for Jeff? Great, thank you. Health and wellness, Gary?
If we start with, I don't know if Teresa or Missy want to just fill us in on any progress, and you've developed a mission statement for the medically fragile portion of our group. Anything you want to update on relative to that?
This is Missy. I'm not sure where Terry is. I think she's in Albany. But basically, we've developed a subcommittee in the Health and Wellness Committee for medically fragile individuals. And we've met, we have put together a really good group of different individuals with different experiences and expertise. And basically what we're trying to do is improve the services and supports of the medically fragile IDD population. It seems to be something that's not considered and is very much an obstacle in both receiving supports and services, which, obviously we can't do certain things, certain skilled nursing negates certain programs, back and forth stuff. So we're trying to collect data, research from other states to see how they have implemented these this coordination of supports and services and accessibility. I'm sure Terry could say it a lot more
Terry is here.
Professionally.
Just one comment. We are going to really start out by conducting a meta-analysis because there have been multiple work groups for the medically fragile under DOH and Haney's, and there are a couple of other states, as Missy mentioned. I know Mayo Clinic and the Cleveland Clinic have all had medically fragile work groups. So we're going to pull all their data together and really understand where the gaps are in the system, and compare that to what we're hearing in New York State and try and put together, just a path forward to understand issues and hopefully eventually have some recommendations.
Good. Thank you, Gary.
So excellent. Thank you. We have already determined and discussed very often with past commissioners that access to care, medical and dental, is an issue. It's being worked on in various levels. We were kind of hoping that this guidehouse report would kind of give us a plan to fix it. Like, where are we going on the fix of this? We know that there have been some increases in reimbursements through Medicaid. We're waiting for data to see the effect of that. And once we synthesize this, we can then come up with some more recommendations. But we could, if possible, somebody from OPWDD come down and speak to us at our next meeting about the guidehouse report, where we'll look at each aspect of it and see where, ideas for the future and how the committee and people feel in our committee about certain aspects of managed care and where it could work or not, where the financing is going to come from or not. So that, because the status quo is not good right now. And we want to see some actions to kind of change that along the way. So see what happens with the reimbursement alone. But right now, if somebody can't get services and they're fee for service someplace in a rural area in upstate New York, and there's a provider that doesn't take Medicaid, how do they access the care without driving to New York City, et cetera? So we know there are problems. It's been acknowledged. Everybody's working on things. Jill, as I mentioned, is working on a geolocation map for services. How long is that going to take? But we're ready to see some outcomes. It's that goal.
Thank you, Gary. OPWDD wants to respond to Gary's comments. The request potentially to have guide house or
Yeah.
presentation on guide house for the health and wellness, and then also maybe a follow up with Jill. I know Jill's on the call with health and wellness on the geo mapping.
Yeah, I think on the geomapping, we should probably follow up with you after the meeting. And, you know, I'm working closely with both Paul and Gary on just what we want the next meetings to be, and I'll continue to work with you both and have that one on my list of things to talk about.
Thanks for
no problem.
Paul.
I can just add, as far as the geomapping goes, I believe OPWDD is working on a survey that will follow up on last survey that they sent out this fall, that we go toward to the Article 16 clinic providers to make sure that OPWDD has accurate data on what services are available, where the main clinic locations are, as well as the satellite locations, so that the geomapping, when it's done, can be as complete as possible. So I think that's a part of the process that's happening right now.
Thanks, Paul. Okay. All right, let's move to Employment and Meaningful Activities Committee. Shamika and Susan, I know you're both on.
Hi, this is Shamika. I can read through the recommendations. Sorry, my brain is. So the first recommendation from the Employment Committee is it reads, understanding that everyone is on a different path to employment, OPWDD should develop a comprehensive graphic or roadmap that would lay out the options for moving from school, day hub, community hub to pre-employment and supportive employment. This document, developed in cooperation with Access VR, should be on the website as well as made available to care managers, families, and day hub staff. Do you want me to stop there and get comments, or do you want to read both of them at the same time?
Thank you, Shamika. Let's stop there and see if there's discussion.
Okay.
Yeah, well, Chair, I could support this, but I would ask that they include more than Access VR. Access VR is limited to a very small group of people who have the potential, I'm understanding this correctly, and somebody else would correct me if I'm wrong, but who have the potential to become independent in employment in a very short period of time. A huge number of people who do not meet that standard. Access VR also limits who can be the, maybe it's OPWDD that limits it, who could be the job coach. They can't use contact workers as job coaches. They can't. And there's this other group who have greater needs, need somebody who knows them. So this resolution is fine, but I would hope that perhaps the committee could go back and look at on the next round, broadening it to say, okay, what do we do for people who are not going to qualify for Access VR? What about that next group?
So I don't think they're limiting the document to just Access VR. I think they're just saying they're going to cooperate with Access VR to develop the document. So Access VR is just a source. Is that correct, Shamika?
That is correct. Yes, it's just the point was just so that OPW and Access VR are working in collaboration with this particular doc. It doesn't necessarily exclude, other. We realize that everybody doesn't fit under that umbrella, and we are addressing that. It's just for this particular document that to make sure that those entities are working together, because often they're at odds or not, or there might be duplication. So the point is that they're working together on the process.
Thanks, Shalika. Alexis?
Yes, hi, it's Alexis. I also just wanted to note, there's a lot of people on the central office EMCA team that has been supporting these conversations. So I think the intent was really to just focus on the areas where there already is some kind of handoff that is supposed to be happening, and making sure that that's as warm of a handoff as possible, and ensuring that somebody isn't falling through the cracks, just transitioning from DR to our service system. We don't want there to be a delay because there's a lack of understanding of what those next steps are. So a graphic would be a great way to communicate that. But also just so everybody's aware that they know what that next step is going to be, so that we're not, delayed on getting all the documentation, so that that person is connected to supported employment to maintain their job if job coaching is still needed. So that's just kind of the more nuanced approach as to why that was provided. So thank you for that explanation, Shamika.
Thanks, Alexis.
This is Susan. This is.
Heard of one situation where a person actually lost a job because it took 3 months.
I'm sorry, who's talking right now?
This is Tom Ravenati. Tom, we're talking about the recommendation. I mean, it's developing a document with graphics. That's the recommendation. Okay. Susan, you're going to add something?
Yeah, go ahead, Susan.
I just wanted to say that our recommendations are really based on concerns about access to employment and knowledge about employment options. So we worked very hard on this. Thank you, Shamika, for pointing out that it's not limited to access VR. For instance, Commission on the Blind would also need to be added in, as would others. But this was developed in concert with Julia Kelly at OPWDD, and we're very happy at the willingness to provide this kind of information.
Thanks, Susan. Right, so they made the motion to accept this recommendation. To give a second?
On behalf of the committee, I make a motion to pass this motion.
Thank you, Susan. I saw Kirk's hand go up to second it. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Anybody against? Abstentions? Okay, it passes. Second recommendation, Susan Shamika.
I just want to really quickly, because I see that there's comments in the chat. I believe that the agenda is posted on the website before, but I don't know, somebody can address that. But I did want to address ask the question about parents on our committee. We have a few parents that sit at least on the employment committee, so they are included. So I just wanted to say that before I read the next one.
Do you want to present the second recommendation?
Sure. On my screen. Okay, here it is. Sorry. Yes. Every individual's life plan should include an opportunity to consider a plan for employment, entrepreneurship, and other meaningful life activities. The person-centered planning process should include questions that will help to develop the transition plan to be person-centered, asking about special interests and skills and lead to employment, entrepreneurship, and other meaningful activities. That is the second recommendation.
Discussion? Ready for motion? Second? Randy? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstain? Motion passed.
Okay, thank you, everyone. And I also want to thank Susan at our last meeting. I know she mentioned her retirement, so I just wanted to thank her for her support and continued support with the committee, and that's.
Thank you, Tamika. I was actually saving that remark, but now that you brought it up, I will.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, thank you. And certainly we all want to thank Susan for her service on the DDAC for many years. Susan, we all want to thank you for all you've done in advancing all issues, but certainly those associated with employment and meaningful activities. But you've been a valued partner, member of the executive committee, and we just want to thank you for all you've done this.
Thank you so much. I always want to add something. This committee is also working on we have a special committee working on the transition from DAC to employment and looking at entrepreneurship being funded. We also have added post-high school education as a meaningful activity that we should be looking at. So I just wanted to give you an idea of the kinds of things we're talking about. We can always use new members. Thank you.
Jessica?
We just want to echo on behalf of OPWDD our thanks to Susan for participation. We know that you all are volunteers and you're busy, so we hope you enjoy your retirement, and thank you so much.
Thank you, Jessica.
Thank you.
Yeah, could I just ask folks to limit side conversations because it's somewhat disrupting to the council's work. Self-direction, Stuart.
Yes, thank you, Nick. The Self-Direction Committee is thrilled to have received the response from OPW very recently for the 3 recommendations that we previously made. The 3 recommendations that we previously made were relatively comprehensive. And we are thrilled that, or at least I am thrilled, and Marietta, who is the co-chair, that OPW is open to forming subcommittees to work with us on addressing those recommendations. I have not had a chance to share the recommendations or the response to the recommendations with our subcommittee members. And so I will do that either tonight or tomorrow. So I really don't feel like I should make any comments other than to say that the feedback was quite extensive from OPW in working with our committee to address the recommendations which we made, which in my opinion were quite robust. So I thank the OPW team. In regards to our current subcommittees, the subcommittee that we had formed for self-advocacy has been disbanded However, it was disbanded for a couple of reasons. One, because Guidehouse was going to be preparing their own survey, and our survey may have been either duplicative or not satisfactory to get through the executive committee meetings to get to the population prior to the Guidehouse survey. So our committee, and I thank them very much, our subcommittee compromised, and Guidehouse reviewed our survey, which Gail Pardo was the co-chair of that committee, and they used much of our material, not all of it, but they did incorporate some of the material that our committee had worked on. So I thank Gail for that work and her team. In terms of our Sustainability and Equity Committee, we now have a lot of hard work to do because now we have a formal response from OPW. And so stay tuned for the next meeting. We will be able to share with you where those recommendations can go from here. At this point, Nick, that's really our committee report.
Oh, thank you, Stuart. Any discussion? Okay. Dolores, Systems Quality, Data and Service Delivery.
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So yes, Michael, my co-chair, is not able to be here today. So our committee is really focused on how people experience the system from the initial point of contact to receipt of services. And so that's a very broad scope that we have. So I'm going to give a report on what we've been doing this year. So we learned that many of our recommendations on the front door process have been incorporated into different initiatives and changes and improvements that have been made, beginning with the front door videos. So a lot of our recommendations have been incorporated into the changes. Very pleased about that. So at this point in time, now we're focused on taking a deeper dive in the front door process and other processes along the way. So we're mapping out the various steps people have to go through, the processes within those steps, and all the sub-processes down, because it's a very complex system, as we all know. So that's kind of where we're focused, and our goal is really to identify the bottlenecks, the gaps, the issues. And so we're going to be working more closely with other committees when we get down to the service delivery piece, because the processes in receiving services for residential or ComHab, whatever, each committee, we're going to tap your expertise to find out what are the issues in those areas. So that's our plan moving forward. And I'm really happy to say that now we've established the Data Community Practice Subcommittee of Systems. And I'm going to just ask Jessica to give a summary of that very first meeting that we had. But I'm hoping that this group, the subcommittee, can really help us with this deeper dive into the processes and what the issues are, how people experience the system versus what we think is happening. Okay, Jessica?
Thanks, Dolores. Jessica Pigeon, OPWDD. And you only have to hear from me again in Michael's absence. So apologies. But yeah, we're really excited. We started the Data Community Practice, which we've talked about a couple of times over the last year or so, getting one of those up and running, and it's in our strategic plan. So we're excited that we kicked it off last week. We have a good group, a mix of different representatives from different folks who would engage with our system. So last week was mostly like introductory, getting to know everybody on the community of practice, a little bit of a high-level overview of potential next steps, and some of the topics that we're looking forward to hopefully discussing in the coming year. So we're really excited. There'll be more to come, in the future as we get even further into the mix. So thank you. Thanks, Dolores.
Dolores, question for you. Can you define experiencing the system? Is it like both identifying or capturing need as well as unmet need, or?
Yeah, we're looking at all of that. We're looking at communication, how people are supported to make decisions. So it's a very broad spectrum.
Thank you.
Liz, do you want me to add something?
Sure.
So what we started off is to understand
What are the,
smart radio. Yeah, we had a couple of meetings, and thanks to Jessica also and the Royce to organize this. Basically, we're trying to capture a sort of a process flow chart from an end user perspective, as well as from a service perspective. So there are two process flow charts as in how does the end users look at the application, then when does it happen. In that process flow chart, we're planning to see metrics at each and every point. And that's the future goal. That's a pretty long goal. We try to start off with a mapping of the process flow chart as the end user experiences.
thank you. Family support services? Yeah.
This is Gail Pato, one of the co-chairs of the Committee for Family Support Services, along with Kathy Nowak. We are thrilled to announce that we're accepting a new member at our upcoming meeting, which will be tomorrow. We have someone representing the CNY region now, which is wonderful, Dawn O'Hara. So we'll be welcoming her. We have a number of things on the agenda for tomorrow. We'll be getting some a presentation and updates from OPWDD. They recently conducted a survey into annual survey practices, how regional offices are doing contract reviews and site visit protocols. They'll be sharing those results with us. We'll also have an update on program data sharing for program evaluations and access to that information so that our family support councils across the state can be better equipped with being able to respond and support OPWDD's mission. We'll also get some updates about the family reimbursement program. They have a recorded training coming available soon. They'll talk about that, as well as some updates to some of the documentation for those programs, hopefully to make them a little more streamlined and seamless. We'll be hearing from OPWDD's fiscal department about the request for proposals, our next steps and timelines for getting funds out to our communities across New York State. We'll also be hearing about how our regional councils across New York State can access their funds so that they can work with families, attract more families, and continue doing the good work alongside OPWDD. So we're excited to hear about some of those guidelines and be able to resume access. It's been a little while. We have some very minor proposed changes to our bylaws. That will be briefly discussed and will be voted on a month from now at a closed meeting. We'll be taking a conversation offline to further discuss CDPAP and the individuals that work in that program for their loved ones, to talk about some different recommendations we may have for OPWDD on ensuring access for those that meet eligibility criteria and need the support. And then we'll also be hearing from our Community Engagement Committee, formerly known as the Stakeholders Committee. They've been doing some really exciting and excellent work in helping regional council membership grow. And they have some proposed changes that they're going to discuss about things that could be a little different on OPWD's FSS page on their website. So we have an action-packed agenda tomorrow. We hope people can tune in. And this is a representation of parents and families and self-advocates across New York State on this committee. So someone had asked earlier, do we have parents on the front line in some of these committees? This one is fully chock full of parents. So we hope you can join us tomorrow.
Thank you, Gail. Any questions for Gail? And again, as we conclude the committee report, we want to encourage all DDAC members that if there's a committee that you have a specific interest in, topic that you have an interest in, more than likely those topics are covered by one of those committees. So we strongly encourage members to participate in the committees. And also, again, there's a list of all of those committees in the packets. I'm going to open it up right now for a few minutes of discussion before we move into public comment. see Gary moving to the microphone. Go for it, Gary.
Greater New York Dental Meeting will be having a course on treatment of people with developmental disabilities by Rita ELO is one of the speakers. Steve Perlman's one of the speakers. If people are interested or want to tell their dentist to try and attend that, it's on Tuesday at the Greater New York Meeting. So Mantra and I are going down on Sunday and possibly Monday to just to take a walk around and advocate for the treatment of people with disabilities and look at some of the technology that's down there. If anyone wants to join us, let us know. And NYU has a program that they are training. They have a grant to train Article 28 clinic employees, dentists on treatment of people with disabilities. And they have a session occurring also on that Monday. So we might drop in and say hello and see how that's going. So just some good things coming.
Scary. Kristen.
So not specific, hi, it's Kristen Proud from the Council on Developmental Disabilities, not specific to state level efforts, which I know this group is mainly focused on, but just to introduce some advocacy work that we've been doing at the federal level with our national association. I'm pleased to report that just yesterday, the Charlotte Woodward Organ Transplant Discrimination Prevention Act was passed by the House. It was passed on consent, so it was unanimous. If you're not familiar with it, this legislation would make it clear that healthcare providers cannot deny access to necessary organ transplants solely on the basis of a qualified individual's disability, which does include developmental disabilities. This is part of the council's growing, newish, but growing body of work around advocacy in the arena of healthcare equity. And obviously, this is a significant piece of legislation in that regard, and I am pleased to say that it was co-sponsored by one of New York's own, Congressman Paul Tonko.
Very good. Thank you for sharing that. Stephanie.
Tomorrow is my last stakeholders meeting for the paratransit bill. I'm going tomorrow to see find out what the cost is for paratransit, for the expansion. That's gonna be tomorrow. But we do need to work on some things with paratransit. The cost of paratransit. For me, I pay $70 just for 20 trips. And that's for me and my friends. And if you don't have the pass, then it's $4 each way. We also have to get the bus drivers paid equally because the bus drivers, they're leaving from paratransit. They're going to big bus because big bus gets paid more money than paratransit drivers. The paratransit drivers only make $24 where I live. And the cleaners get $3 more than paratransit drivers. And big bus gets $30 an hour. They need more bus drivers because the bus drivers from paratransit are not staying. They're leaving. I seen a lady quit just in front of me. She said she was there. That was her first day. I dropped my money in the money box. She said, I'll help you. And she goes, but I'm leaving. I said, where are you going? She goes, I'm going to big bus. They make more money. They need more mechanics and more cleaners and bus drivers and more buses. That's my next goal to work on. My bill is almost done in the Assembly and the Senate, the 84165 for the expansion. I'm excited. I only been working on it for 10 years. But I do need some help getting things done for paratransit because paratransit's a good program. We just have to fix it up a little bit. And if you can help me, I would appreciate it.
Thank you, Stephanie. Thank you for your advocacy. Obviously, paratransit is important to supporting people who live independently in the community, work, access vital services, healthcare. So we appreciate it, and I'm sure you'll let us know what more we can do. Okay. Any other discussion items before we move to public comment? I'll just survey the remote sites on that end. No, John?
My apologies. We were having a side discussion here. Can you repeat the question?
Just looking to see if there's any discussion items before we move to public comment.
No.
Okay. Buffalo? Any of our DC participants on the council? All right. I'm going to turn it over to Rachel, who's going to begin public comment.
Before you do that, I will come back to you. We've had some discussion about housing, and I'd like to hear from OPWDD, other than the commission that we're talking about, which as John points out is a longer range approach. What's being done today to meet the needs of people certified and non-certified? And I'm understanding there are a lot of vacancies that the agencies still have. There are a lot of people who want to be placed. And there's an awful lot of people who are very afraid, wake up every morning saying, where's my loved one going to be living? If I die tomorrow, he or she is going to be homeless. I haven't heard anything from OPWDD addressing these concerns. What's happening now? What are they doing to make it easier for people to set up non-certified housing?
It's Alexis in the room, for those of you who can't see me. So in terms of what are we doing today, the response would be the structure that's put in place today is what's being done, right? So we have the certified residential opportunity process. There is an assigned designation level. There is matching based on what's available and what is based on that individual person's needs. That process has not changed, although there have been conversations about the rollout of the pro regulations, the rollout of the pro ADM. So all of that stuff that has been talked about over the last year or two, that all being rolled out is an effort to get us closer to at least speaking the same language. One thing that we have talked about in great detail, and I'll leave it to the data folks if they want to add anything to this, but one of the biggest issues is that when we are pulling data, it is so important that we have consistent definitions across the board. One thing that we do not have right now is a consistent definition of a vacancy being viable or not being viable. And if there is a non-viable vacancy in the system, that is not an adequate picture of the footprint that is available at this point in time. That's what Anne Marie has been reporting out related to the capacity management system, is us pulling into the current year, right? Like we are in 2024. We should not be using these ancient systems and technology. This is Alexis talking, not OPWDD. Sorry about that. My personal bias about our tech is coming out. But we really need to catch up with the current times. So that is what Anne Marie has been reporting out on, to kind of move towards a greater consistent system that people are utilizing, not using a piece of paper to let us know that a screening has been conducted, not submitting a piece of paper as a referral for a certified residential opportunity. So a lot of those kind of structural coming up to speed and updating us in the current century is needed before we have conversations about what else needs to be improved. So I think just to respond to your question directly, there are many things being done. It doesn't mean that it's being done at its best capacity because we don't have that IT infrastructure in place, but we are very aware of that. And I think we have been responsive in many forums about that data conversation and what it is that we're continuing to work on. We have non-certified housing subsidies that are available. We have integrated supportive housing grants. There's eShite. There's a slew of resources that are available. But if there are any other, specific questions that you have, happy to speak to that.
I would just, yeah, this is Rachel. So I would just add on to everything Alexis said. There's one other, new service that we're really excited about to help support independent living, which is the Home Enabling Supports Program. I think the draft out of the EDM over the summer, and we're still working on getting the program launched. But the goal is that this is technology and potentially remote supports and telehealth and things that would better support someone to be able to live independently in the community, or with fewer staff supports, to maximize their independence. So that's just another thing that we are very excited about working to get launched. And Jess, did you have anything else?
Yeah, I was just gonna add, more broadly speaking, like we definitely hear, as I mentioned in our 507 forums, as you guys have mentioned many times, as has come up in, the residential committee, we know that housing is a priority area for our big fund. So we've also made that a priority area internally. We had a leadership meeting where we pulled the whole team together. Again, it sounds like a broken record, but you will see updates on some of our priorities and what we're prioritizing in housing specifically in our annual update. We have a number of projects underway, and so we're very excited about some of that work, which Alexis and Rachel have mentioned. And it is a place that we're paying attention. So we hear you, you'll see some of that, and we are focused in the area.
My only comment on this is that, and what I've seen is those with the least needs that are being benefited by everything that OPWDD is doing. There is the group between those who go into group homes with high needs and those who are not able to be self-supporting, but need help and can live independently with supports. That's the group that's having great difficulty finding housing.
Yeah, we
There are lectures all over the place about how to do it. And I know a group of parents, basically mothers, are basically traveling. They have seen them in New Jersey. They've seen lectures out in Long Island. There's one in Kentucky that was just on whatever. And they're saying, why is New York not doing the same thing? Why is OPWDD standing in the way by having rules and regulations that don't allow for independent living for this group of people? And, I frankly would like to ask how many people have qualified for OPWDD living in group in homeless shelters in New York City right now, around the state. There was a law that was passed by the governor at the governor's urging in the budget a while ago that if someone exhibited certain types of behaviors, they should be sent for an analysis, and if they're found to have mental illness, they would be diverted from the court. And my question was, what if they were found to have autism and not mental illness? The answer is they go to Rikers. And what are we doing about that? And why are they there? They're there because they had no place to live. They were on the street.
Yeah, so we can't speak to that, that situation specifically, but I'll just say, again, we definitely hear what you guys are saying about housing. I hear your concerns. What I'm also hearing as an undertone, more broadly is, and it's something we're working on, is how we can better communicate some of the work that we are doing, some of the efforts that we have underway, some of the options that are available for people. And like was already mentioned previously, some of the data. So you can actually see, what the data shows and reflects. We know there's that, and then there's what we're hearing, and we can kind of find, where the areas are that we really should be focusing between the data and what we're hearing. Sometimes there's just misinformation out there. So I think we need to do a good, improve, how we're communicating
information to and related to services and supports, so that people, don't have misinformation and do have access to the services and supports that they actually, are able to be, accessing. So we appreciate that. I think there's a couple other hands too.
Thank you for taking my comments. And
Yes.
I often sound hostile, and it's not directed at you guys. It's a frustration with the whole system. You just happen to be here.
Yeah, no, we
Thank
appreciate
you for
the
that.
passionate advocacy.
And we
Yeah,
thank
of
you for
everything.
being here and listening. Thank you.
Yeah, thank
Thanks,
you.
Tom. I see we have John's hand up. John?
Yeah, to Tom and to the other folks who've commented, there are ways to make non-certified housing in all its forms, whether it be living by oneself in an apartment or living with other people. And that's the good news, and there are ways to do it. The bad news is that it takes enormous effort, takes months and months, if not years and years, to do it. And at the end, you're still left with the question, as a parent, what happens when I'm not doing this? And I think that that's part of the urgency behind both of the motions that the residential committee made today, which were that we need housing navigators, because I understand, Alexis' comment about care managers, but the fact is most of them have no clue as to how to get housing done. But also to think about, rather than sort of trying to keep our head above water in the current drowning system, how do we look forward and say, what are we going to do for the next decades? And how are we going to make this into a system that we'd all be proud of, as opposed to one that we're constantly worried about? So the good news is there are options. The bad news is it takes Herculean efforts to make it happen.
Thanks, John. Okay, I think
Okay, if I have a quick comment. Thank you. It's Alexis. So I wanted to respond to a couple of things. Number one, I understand the frustration. I absolutely do. I don't feel it directed at me in any way, but what I do think is very important is, instead of lobbing out any type of generalization, that there are very specific examples that are provided to OPWDD. This is a public meeting, so we have a lot of people listening in, and we'll walk away from this meeting thinking that what is discussed at this table is fact, when it isn't backed up by data or a very specific example. So I want to put that out there as a responsibility for all of us. We don't always have the opportunity to kind of pause throughout a meeting and just say, hey, can we actually fact check that really quickly? So I wanted to put that out there. So thank you guys for just bringing this feedback, but it is very important that we just make sure there are specific examples brought up offline versus the generalizations kind of lobbed out there.
Thanks for that comment, Alexis. And I think, again, that underscores the need for us to really have good data on what the needs of people are and what's met and what's not met. And I think that's something that both the residential committee has asked for, but I don't know if we have that. And I think that's what we're looking for. Okay. All right, let's move to public comment. Rachel?
Thank you, Nick. So we're going to spend, I think, until 2 p.m. to go through public comment today. As a reminder, during the public comment period, people will have 3 minutes to share comments on the topics of your choice. We're going to try something a little different this meeting and use the 3-minute timer that we also use in our strategic planning forums to help keep people just aware of where they are in the 3 minutes allotted. And the goal of the 3 minutes is so that we can hear from as many people as possible. We only have about 24 minutes left. So that's the goal. And I would just say, if people have any specific concerns or specific questions, I opened up the QA feature in the meeting. So if you go to the bottom of the screen, all the way to the right, there's 3 dots there. If you submit your question, a specific question there, we'll be able to respond to it either during the meeting or save it and respond to you afterwards. That's a better place to put a specific question than during the public comments, since we won't be able to respond during the comment period. Some mechanics on how you raise your hand. So if you go to the bottom of the screen, there's a little hand. If you click that, you'll get on the list for public comment. When I say your name, you will be getting a request to unmute, and then you'll have 3 minutes to begin. And first up, we have Roy. Roy, you should be getting a request to unmute.
I'm not on my computer.
Quickly,
Sorry. I'm the
since you've
mother,
got me
I'm the
under
mother
the,
of a girl.
hello, hello. I have 3 minutes, right?
Hey, Roy, I can hear you. Go ahead.
Okay. I want to talk about quickly the DDAC and advocacy. Tom, I believe, mentioned it very early and caused me to raise my hand. My wife, Bride, and Arlene and I, of 50 years, have 3 sons with autism and intellectual disabilities. We raised them at home, and I have lost 2 of my sons. Excuse me, I'm trying to talk here. I have a limited time. We've raised our sons at home. 2 of them have passed away due to the failings of the system. And Tom, with all due respect, and I know you're not yelling at the folks at OPWDD, but there was a former governor here, a previous governor, who starved the services for people with OPWDD. And that's why my sons passed away, because their ESPs were underpaid and overworked and failed in their mission. And so let's remember that it is important that the PDDAC advocate with legislators and the governor's office, who this particular governor started out good, but she has cut the allowance requested by the agency by more than half each year. She's given us more, which is better than her predecessor each time, but it's a pittance compared to what is needed to have done. So advocacy is critical. Secondary, I agree that we should look at the budget. You guys should look at the budget and find out what monies has been authorized and how much has been sent. But I would say more importantly, what services are authorized for an individual and what are actually received and produced. What data are we getting on that? I haven't heard it mentioned here today. And I question that we need to look at that very, very carefully. I totally support inclusive housing as well. With John, I work with John on out here on Long Island. He's in the city, but he comes out here and visits us in suburbia. So I think I'm done, and I made it under time. I'm proud of myself. Thank you very much. Do keep up your good work, and I wish you all well. And I thank all of the staff here at OPWDD for the hard work you do. Keep doing it. Thank you.
Thank you, Roy. Next up, we have Hilma. After you should be receiving a request to unmute.
Am I on? Hope to unmute.
She did unmute it. Go ahead.
Oh, I'm on. Okay, I'm a mom in New York, in Manhattan. I have a daughter. And for the last 7 years, I have vigilantly called every agency you can even imagine for female housing. I think it is not acceptable to have co-ed housing. It is not acceptable to shove 2-3 people in a small bedroom. The staff, from the few people that I've spoken to who do live in group homes, say they have no idea about nutrition. They feed them horrible food. So what I want to know is, are you planning any female homes where they can be one person in a room? There are so many moms that I know who are flipping out. What if I die? Where is my child going to go? I don't want my daughter in a co-ed situation. So what is your response to that?
We can respond. Thank you for your question. As I said at the top, we're not going to be responding to questions during the session, but if you could just put something in the QA so we know your name, we can follow up with you afterwards. Thank you.
Okay, I have a question. I'm going to use my friend's time. 3-pronged, okay? One has to do with sustainability. I need some specificity about who's going to take over when I'm dead. My son lives in a his own apartment with a neurotypical roommate in Manhattan. So they actually rent stabilized apartment. Took me months to find. So I want to know about how is that going to be sustained? Not everyone can afford to pay a fiscal intermediary or however much it costs to staff it, and who's going to take over the quality control of that staffing. And the staffing goes from the roommate to all the ComHab workers. Then there's the issue of employment. My son is perfectly capable of shelving books in a library, but CUSAC rejected him because they wouldn't let a ComHab worker who has instructional control over him to help him, so they rejected him. So I'd like to know, do you have any kind of control over their very stupid rules about not allowing people who know the particular person, the person who is seeking employment, to have, to take over that role? And 3 is, I've been looking, I know all about confidentiality, that issue. However, is there any way that a parent can just reach out to other parents of kids with disabilities, my kid's autistic, and to just somehow create some sort of quasi community feeling, like at least get a friend, someone who shares that interest? I know all about, again, I won't repeat myself. Okay, that's it.
Thank you both.
Oh, also 3, and this is actually very pie in the sky, but I know that in Boston they're doing this. They're creating actually communities with people with disabilities living in proximity to each other, and that way they can share staffing in one respect or another, and that way costs are reduced. But that's very pie in the sky, especially someplace like Manhattan.
Okay, thank you. Is there anyone else in New York City that would like to make a comment? Okay, thank you both. Back to online, we have Chris Polega. Oh, okay, sorry, I think there's one more in New York City.
You go.
Yes, my name is Solomon Bryan. I'm a young gentleman that has learning disability / Asperger's. I've been a constituent of OPWDD for almost 18 years. I'm bringing my concerns because I am with the agency Tri-County Care, but I'm having issues with the ISS because they found I was not Section 8, and I'm trying to get things situated with them, and also trying to navigate other services as they come about.
Okay, thank you, New York City. Next up, we have Ralph Warren. Ralph, you just got a request to unmute.
You guys hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. Sorry. Okay, it's not always worked. So, yes, I'm a self-advocate. I have spoken at many DDAC public comments since 2018. So I will just follow up on the advice at the end, which was great, to give a specific example and to do fact checking. So I'm going back to Dr. Goldstein's question about getting data on medical visits, specialty visits, dental service visits, etc. Dr. Black, who was Tamika Black, who's the senior person at OPWDD for data. I've had interactions with her for email for several years now. So I fact checked the things she spoke about. She mentioned looking at the NCI data. I looked at the reports from NCI after that. They have maybe 1 or 2 questions that deal with very general public health measures for access, and just asks about access, things like mammograms, blood pressure screening, etc. Nothing specific to the kinds of issues that have come up time and time again at many of the advocacy meetings, some on the formal boards that I'm on, around these kinds of needs for specific medical service data. So going next, she said, look at she has referred us to the Life Plan Data Exchange. Well, I've emailed her several times about that since 2018. And basically, and I checked now to see the data dictionary. It's actually slightly labeled something different for the CCOs, but in any case, it gives you the fields. And I asked her a couple years back to find out what was the most recent document. I see nothing more recent than that. There is not structured data that would allow useful extraction of data to get back to Dr. Goldstein's questions. There is nothing in the CCO Life Plan Data Exchange that OPWDD has created. So going back a little bit more broader than that, I want to go back and support what Roy just said. It's a little more challenging because it deals with Medicaid claims data, so there would be a lag, probably a 6 month to a year lag on that. But it's very critical that we get the distinction between services that are approved at the regional level and services that are actually provided, the amounts of those services that are provided. That can be obtained it should be able to be obtained from the CCO life plan structured data, but it's not in there because OPWDD still, as far as I can tell, has not required that to be part of structured data. So stepping back just a second, a little bit further back, I'm very disappointed to hear about no discussion at all with Guidehouse presenting to this panel. Years back, before this panel, there were those kinds of presentations. It doesn't seem to be happening now. It's more closed off than it was several years ago. Guidehouse should be reporting to us in this session about the self-direction evaluation they are just undertaking. They did a presentation to the self-direction fiscal intermediary and broker forum about a week or so ago that was sent around the PDF to those that couldn't attend by other advocates to other advocates. This is unacceptable. This is what this body is supposed to be doing. I hear in other boards that I'm on as an official member, some people on this body, some outside that do attend these things as I do right now, extreme frustration because of misleading statements by staff, lack of consistency, of openness that I have said several times in this past year from this point going back. Examples from Texas, from Virginia, from New Hampshire, other states, where at the subcommittee level, there is openness that we can see what's going on. If that's not acceptable here, at least you can give us the reports of the subcommittees before the meeting so we can process it. But even more important than that is getting the response, the interactions with the contractor like Guidehouse has been contracted to do both the managed care and the ST evaluation. That should be discussed at this body. So I don't see a timer. I could say a lot more. I don't want to take up other people's time. I stop here.
Thank you, Ralph. Next up, we have Hilma. You just got a request to unmute.
Mavreo, and my question is not question, it's a comment and a concern. As a single mom of special needs child and broker, I have faced several of my clients go into shelters and lose their self-direction at the same time the moment they step in shelter. And sometimes some of the shelters do not accept it. The individual, if they have a condition, how we gonna address that situation? For me, as a single mom of special needs, I have fear that something ever happened to me and my son end up in the shelter and he cannot stay in shelter because he have a condition. How can this gonna be addressed in the future? Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we have Chris Palega.
Chris Palega, and while I play a number of roles in our community, today I'm speaking as a parent who knows firsthand that being a family caregiver comes with profound and ongoing physical, psychological, and financial stressors that are at times overwhelming. Just like family caregivers here with us today and so many others across the state, I deal with these challenges every single day. But despite these challenges, many in our community believe that family caregivers who support their developmentally disabled loved ones at home are still the most powerful resource available to OPWDD as they work to alleviate the stress on a system of care in crisis. We, the family caregivers, are the largest subgroup of the direct care workforce, numbering in the hundreds of thousands, and we're providing billions of dollars worth of services without compensation. The reality is that in doing so, we have built and we are maintaining the most utilized residential option for developmentally disabled New Yorkers by far, living at home with family. Many of us believe that any effort to address the monumental challenges being faced by a system of more expensive and more restrictive residential options will be rendered much less effective without first having a deep understanding of the role family caregivers play and the system sustaining work that we do. And we must amplify support for families who care for their developmentally disabled loved ones at home via this Family Support Services program. Of course, this pursuit must include the development of reliable, valid, and transparent data sets, and we must employ these data objectively in order to drive the flexible, person-centered programs and policies that have historically underpinned the success of FSS. This can begin with a collection of the simple data sets described in Mental Hygiene Law, Section 4143, the statute that established FSS. This data should be further informed by the statewide FS Committee's past recommendations to the Strategic Plan for Data Collection and Transparency, by professionals from our community, and most importantly, by the family caregivers who are foundational to the viability of the entire system of care. Finally, many of you, along with groups of influencers, policymakers, and leading government officials across the state, are working to redesign our current unsustainable system of care. Please keep in mind that regardless of how this monumental challenge is resolved, the people in the community that I've come to know have long been convinced that the success of any solution will be wholly dependent on the work of family caregivers who support their developmentally disabled loved ones at home. Properly targeted investment in family caregivers, with or without federal financial participation, is not only the right thing to do, but it is among the most responsible and effective investments that we can make as we work to ensure the success of our entire system of care and the people who rely on it every day. Because our community knows that making families stronger will make the entire system of care much stronger. And I want to thank you for the opportunity to address the council and the community today on the importance of family support services, and to all of you for your unwavering support of developmentally disabled New Yorkers. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we have Kate. Kate, you're unmuted.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me? Sorry.
Yes, we can.
Okay, perfect. I'm a parent. I'm an 11-year-old. I started the OPWDD process several years ago in 2020 and did the CANS assessment last year, November. And I was given, I'm with Braverhood in Tri-County in Brooklyn, by the way. Long story short, I was told I would get a care manager assigned around August this year. I kind of didn't accept that as an answer and went to one of these meetings, and you guys sent me to my local OPWDD office, and I was able to get a care manager assigned the next day. I have helped several other parents with the same situation. So there's definitely a lag in being assigned a care manager. But even though it's September now, almost the end of September, I have not been successful in getting an intake for self-direction anywhere. All the FIs in Brooklyn and Manhattan, and I've reached out to all of them on the list, have told me, and several other parents and brokers, that the wait time is currently 4 months minimum for self-direction intakes. And I had actually started the process in June, with Braverhood. And then in mid-August, I was told, never mind, we're not taking self-direction intakes. I'm not the only person that this was done to. Another parent that I know and another broker I know this happened to as well. So my question is, my question is, why is no one currently taking self-direction intakes? Is it because the contracts are not renewed currently with the state? Or what's going on? Because I mean, by the time that I get a budget approved and everything, we're looking at probably mid next year that I'll be getting services for my child. And this whole process has taken several years. So, and I know I'm not the only one. And while we're waiting years on getting services, our children are not getting their needs met. So that's my question. What is going on with self-direction intakes? Is it true that the contracts for the FIs are not renewed until January? And if that's the case, that doesn't seem legal. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Kate. Next up is Ellie.
Parent of a 42-year-old, so I've been around the block a bit. I want to say amen to Roy, Ralph, and Chris, because I don't really think I can add much more to what they said. Data. But OPW, I have another little bone to pick. OPW has begun to stop in-person dialogue. Well, first by putting out the front door online, and then by doing the cast. New York City Fair had set up a town hall on the CAS, and I'm not going to go into the details of it, but we were told that we couldn't do our format, and they were working on a YouTube. There are many instances of thinking that a YouTube or a canned report can take the place of dialogue. And I'm telling you, it can't. There is no substitute for listening and talking. This meeting isn't working that way. There is no dialogue. If the committees had submitted their requests to OPW in a timely manner, then there is no reason that OPW came back to the committees yesterday. Not only does DDAC deserve the respect and for the information, but those of us who are the additional people who are online here who don't have the inner circle and for a variety of reasons didn't want it, we still have the right and to the information in a timely manner, in an open, respectful way. I'm babbling, I'm sorry, but this meeting was rather painful to go through because there were so many, I don't know, we'll get back to you. I don't know, we'll get back to you. I don't know. So I would appreciate a tighter meeting with shared information in a more timely manner on everybody's part, because I have no way of knowing who was late. Thank you.
Thanks, Ellie. We're at time, but there's one more. Okay. Cindy. And that'll be the last commenter today.
Thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to mention I'm a broker for self-direction. I do want to address the one parent. Yes, the contracts are done based on state budget approval. The budget has been used up. There is no more money. So many agencies did get some when the state found some money, and if they didn't get enough, you're going to have to wait till January when the new budgets go, just so you know. We just had a meeting on that. Secondly, what I would like to say is I would like to have it addressed that when you have self-direction and you move into a group home, your budget is not enough to pay for day services if you want to be in a pre-voc or a vocational or a day hab program of some kind. Everybody else in the program, whether you're in self-direction or not, gets to decide if they want their day hab outside of their budget or inside of their budget. In a group home, you don't have that option. If you go to day hab, it must be paid for in your budget. The cheapest day hab comes to over $40,000 a year. I have not seen one budget, and I have people with budgets over $130,000. I've not seen one of them end up with more than, say, $32,000. So they can't even afford the cheapest day hab, which isn't necessarily here on Long Island. They're more around $50,000. How is that a self-directed life? You are not given an option there. You either don't get to go to day hab and you don't have enough money to pay for anything else, even if you do go to day hab. So that's something that should be addressed. Thank you.
Okay, again, I'd like to thank the members of the public for participating in today's event. Even though we do not, OPWDD does not respond to your comments, they are noted, they do go back, they are part of the process of the planning. And certainly the council itself discusses these comments in our committee work. So we appreciate your participation. I'd like to thank the members of the council who took the time out of their schedules to actually come to the meetings in person. Again, at the different sites, we were able to achieve quorum. I appreciate that. We were able to pass our bylaws. We were able to pass several recommendations. Regarding the recommendations that we have made in the past and that we've recently gotten responses, we will look for a way to share those with the public because we do think it's important to close the loop on those. So we will work on that and we'll keep you posted. Our next meeting is December 3rd from 11 to 2 o'clock. I want to thank again everybody for participating and we will see you then.